guys for joining us. Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, the second day of the Food Finance Institute. We're really excited that you're here. We have a few more that are going to be coming in, but today's going to be an exciting day, and I'm just going to hand it right off to Sarah.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get us started. So day 2 for us today is kind of fixing or setting up or preparing. I know you're all at various stages of getting your kind of financial benchmarks or your sales forecasting or kind of your revenue expectations, your expenses kind of set up for your market, or even understanding them if you're new in the role. So think of today as just sort of a how to best think about this side of the business, right? Kind of planning your expenses, planning your revenue, kind of thinking about how those different kind of like an income statement, balance sheet, cash flow might interact to show the state of your business. And in this case, your business is obviously that market hub. And so that's kind of the framework of today. Before we dig in, I think we wanted to do just like a good morning, quick round robin check-in about how folks are feeling today or feeling after yesterday. If there's any key takeaways. So just like a quick, it also gives us some time to let other folks join in, and then we'll kind of go over the agenda and dig into the wonderful things we're doing together today. So why don't we start with Sarah George? You're the first on my list.
Absolutely. I love checking in with people and I can see their faces. So I'm going to play your screen down. Good morning, everybody. I'm doing fantastic. I got to celebrate last night with my dad coming home from the hospital, actually the nursing home, after being in the hospital for a 2.5 month stay with COVID, almost 3 month stay with COVID. So we were celebrating last night. So today I'm a little drowsy because we were throwing a really big celebration. So, but I am like super duper stoked and celebrating. So ready to rock and rumble. And if I haven't replied to emails, I was absent for that reason. And I'll get to those, I promise. But yeah, I'm doing fabulous today. And I did a lot of thinking last night about some of the different things I heard, and I can't wait to learn through today. Some of these numbers, though I see them, they don't sink in on the impact. And so I'm hoping today I can kind of start piecing those together, and I'm excited about that opportunity.
Marlise, thanks, Sarah.
Should we popcorn it, Marlise?
I love it. Popcorn it. Yes.
Marlise, you're popcorned.
Hey, I'm next. I actually spent quite a bit of time last night thinking about the particular page that's called a profitable business model and the concept of the right brand. And I'm not sure we have the right brand in how we've done our naming. So I've done some thinking about that, and that was pretty important. I appreciate that. So I'm going to popcorn to Kent.
Well, good morning.
Oh, lost sound.
We heard good morning. All of a sudden it muted.
Oh no.
No, we heard you say good morning. What just happened? Okay, Kent. Goodness. I did just get a text in the chat privately asking if there's a recording from yesterday. And Jane, I did upload that to our manager recording doc this last night. And so the recording is there, and we'll have those eventually added to the website. Yes.
Where is it, Sarah?
Yep. In our manager meetings folder, hub manager folder, manager meetings. I did.
Okay, got it.
And I labeled all of them with the dates of and what the trainings are. So now you don't have just a random array of videos in there. They're actually labeled appropriately.
Okay, thanks. I'm working on getting today's materials up on the website. So I'll pop the link out in chat when it's ready for people to go there.
Can't try again now. Thank you so much, Jane. You're a rock star. Nothing. What? When our tech savior is tech stuck. What a bummer. Huh.
Wait, we got something in the chat. Good morning. I'll need to be in and out today as I have some unexpected meetings. Loved working in the small group yesterday and happy to have the PowerPoint and recording. This will be my check-in as my first appointment is now. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Ken. Oh, we need a popcorn for Kent. Let's go to Candace.
I think the note from in the chat was from Verna.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
Thank you.
I don't know.
Even better. Verna.
Don't know if Kent wants to check into in that. I don't know. Okay.
Okay.
I'm good. Still taking in everything. Takes me a minute to process everything. So there's a lot of great information. The marketing stuff was really interesting. Excited to probably go back in and dig into that again. And so I'm really excited about the recordings and having that available again, like just so many resources, and just really grateful for all of that. The exercise yesterday afternoon was really great too, to get like the ideas that have been like out there in the ethers, like down on paper, and seeing it was really exciting. So that was a cool part of, yes, it was all really great. And that was really cool part of the process. So thank you.
Awesome.
Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. I haven't had a lot of time to really process. I had a pretty big meeting last night with the Olmsted History Center, asking them to share some of their land with our farmers, and I'm not quite sure how it went, but we'll see. And then this morning we had a little spring fever situation. I have a farmer that's renting our barn, an old dairy barn, and the biggest boy has escaped, and he's back with the flock. He's back with his ladies. So I was trying to wrangle him out, but I couldn't get it. So he's gonna have to stay there until backup arrives. But
Oh my goodness.
farm adventures. I'll pick Willalyn.
Hi, everyone. I was just going through all the information that was presented yesterday. There was a lot. It was a little overwhelming for me, but I was just going through our lean business model canvas for Grand Rapids and going through the problem, solution, and all that good stuff. So I'm just regurgitating the information. So thank you so much, Sarah, and oh, you're both Sarah.
Sarah's.
Yeah, those were really good information that you presented yesterday. So thank you.
Excellent.
Popcorn to Jane.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I have a farm story too. So I feed the sheep with big round bales, and they eat out the bottoms, and I try to get out there and tip the bales over before they collapse and trap a sheep. But because I was sick over the weekend and it was a long slog through snow with no trail broken, I didn't go out there until day before yesterday when I was feeling a little better, and they had tipped over the bale and the ram was trapped under it. So he had been there for at least a day, but he has really big curly horns, and I think they made enough of an air pocket that he didn't suffocate. So I was able to get the hay off of him and get him dragged out and brought him some water with molasses and salt in it, which he scarfed down, and he couldn't stand, but I did some sheep physical therapy and got him up on his front legs yesterday
Oh my
morning, and
goodness.
by yesterday evening, he could stand and walk, and he's gonna be okay. So holy smokes, there's
Wow.
always something.
Yeah.
Um,
Whew.
so yeah, Farm Adventures, Amanda, I hear ya. And then I was just thinking back to a year ago when I took this training from Tara Johnson, the founder, and remembering how overwhelming it felt because I studiously avoided economics and business classes in high school and college. And, you know, it just, yeah, after you swim in it for a while, you start to get it, I think. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, just don't worry, just keep swimming. I'll popcorn it to Candace.
I checked in a bit ago. Pass it to Laura.
Hi, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. I am actually on my way to pick up a case of apples for the food shelf, and we got a really nice donation of vegetables. So I am kind of correlating those and going to be listening along as long as my signal holds out, and looking forward to working on the information some more.
Awesome. Well, happy to have you, and however long it keeps you with us. And that
Yeah,
probably means you cannot see who's in the room if you're on the phone.
I cannot, no.
So let's popcorn to Christine.
Good morning. I got to play you some lovely Celtic music.
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. I was playing 80s music before that, so you almost got the final countdown. So, but yeah, yesterday was a lot of information. So I think with these things, it's just a matter of soaking it in. And I'm glad that Jane was good enough to put your visuals, your graphs and everything on the site so that we can go back and look at them, because sometimes it's just hard to absorb everything.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm a squirrel on ADD when I'm here, because I'm not used to, you guys have been doing the Zoom for a while, but I'm not used to it. So it's like, I feel like I'm sitting here going like this the whole time. Anyhow, so it's just an adjustment, and I think it's just a lot of information, so I feel fidgety, but I think I might end up just drawing and listening today, because I need to be able to hear you. I focus better if I have something else in my hand. I don't know if other people do that, but I can listen better if I have that part of my, that squirrel part of my brain occupied. So, but I really appreciate everything. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, it's been good and to go through everything, and because you're bringing up items that we don't always process, so it's nice to have a list and go through all those to know what we should be doing. Thank you. I don't know who hasn't gone. Beverly, have you gone?
I have not.
Why don't you go?
Good morning, everyone. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to sleep last night because of all the thoughts in my head and all the ideas that I got from all of you yesterday. But I managed to, because I think I was exhausted. So I did that. But I'm just really excited about all the things you are all doing that we could add here. And so thank you so much.
I love your scarf, by the way.
Thank you.
I love that shout out, because we love that peer learning side and kind of sharing out that business model canvas. And I know that's kind of what this whole grant and project is doing, helping you guys do that. So I really love that you called that out. Yes. Are we on to like Kathy maybe? Or Kathy, did you share? Or is it Jody?
I can share. I So Kathy here with my puppy Arwen. If you can see her, she has to be held this morning for some reason. And she's already chased in my sheep, Jane and Amanda, for your must be sheep day or sheep week. And my major is actually ag business with an ag econ and farm business management minors. And so the first time that I went through Tara's FFI, I loved it, right? All of that was so good in the abstract until I realized I would have to take all of that and put it into practice and actually make something work. And that then was, whoa. So I love the fact that this is, I think, my third time, and I'm learning even more new things from Sarah Larson. So Sarah, way to go. So I'm going to enjoy the day listening and participating. So I'm not sure who else is left.
Jody, did you go? I think we got
No,
Jody.
I can go, and I'm sorry I missed you in the afternoon yesterday. I had to go off to other things, and I'll do that again today. But it was really fun to listen to all of your stories, and I wish I could have learned more about each of your situations, because I just think it's fascinating. I think I'm going to go back and watch the recording of the afternoon if there was any yesterday, because it's been great to hear everybody. And I'll pass it on to Bjorn.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I same situation as yesterday. I'm staring at potatoes here while I listen in. So, good morning, everyone. Yesterday was awesome. It was great to have those tools and have that time to discuss with the other members of our Moorhead group with that tool, that lean business model, to get thoughts from swimming around in my head on paper and then discuss it with others. So that was great, and will also be useful in conveying kind of our business model that we're going after with the board that we have through the co-op. So yeah, thank you for all that. And I also had a good initial meeting with our first school nutrition director yesterday after everything. So that made me feel good going into the night.
Yay, that's awesome. It sounds like you might be on the phone, Bjorn, but I love how you applied like that. This now helps you speak to others about your business model, right? Like your board or potential funders and all of that. And so that, yeah, that's fantastic. I think Kathleen.
Hi, I got in a little late this morning because I had a meeting with the Feast Marketplace event. So I just got to put a little shout out there. That'll be on the 17th. Yeah, 17th in Cannon Falls, a buyer's marketplace. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's coming together. So, but I said, I got to go because I have a feeling day 2 is going to be really intense. So there might be some like more specific processes and some more, I don't want to say mathematical, but maybe some formulas and things for margins and calculating, really getting a handle on finances. So I'm looking forward to that because I do have a background in retail. And so all of this talk about margins and everything is really right up my alley. And I know how important it is. And I guess that was my main takeaway from yesterday was that, the more clarity you have around the business plan and your goals, and the more you can talk about that and hash that out and get it down on paper and get it really clear, the more you have the tools to establish like really good margins and really get set up for success. So I'm looking forward to today too. And I wondered if Allison had gone. Okay.
Hi, folks. My husband just walked in the door with some cold medication for me.
Oh.
yesterday I was running just on tea and juice, and now I think like I'm gonna try some decongestant and see where that gets me. So I am not an abstract thinker. I'm very, very concrete and linear. And so exercises like these are really hard for me. I do really well paired with an abstract thinker who can help me with like these big ideas. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And so then I'm the one pulling down like step 1, step 2, step 3. The abstract thinker is like, oh, we're at A, we want to get to Z, but they have no idea how to get there. But I'm the one that goes, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have to do all of this before we can get to the end. So this group is great. That's kind of what I'm going to have help with. So yeah, I've been just thinking about those abstract concepts and how can I make that work for me and my, linear concrete thinking. So I'm looking forward to just more. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And I think because you have all of these different ways and support, that it does help you leverage kind of your strengths and pull in other folks to really complement you. And so I think that's a huge asset, whether it's within your hub network, like your community, or from other communities and other market hubs here too. So yes, I empathize with a lot with that as well. And a lot of those points. So I think we got everybody right. I'm kind of looking if anybody's raising a hand or we missed anybody. I think we're all good. Perfect. We'll go ahead and dig in then for today. Let me go back to getting my screen shared. Okay, excellent. So just a reminder of kind of our kind of plan for the day. We're going to be talking through some content till about 10:45, 10:50. We're going to give you a little bit of break because some of this is the numbers, financial stuff, and it can get a little overwhelming, but really encourage you to hold on to those nuggets that we've heard people say, right? Of, it can just kind of observe, kind of let stuff sink in. No, you don't need to have it all sit in. Know that it'll become more relevant as you start actually doing the work. You have these materials for the long term, so you can come back at it and look at them. All of those wonderful points. So we'll be going through some content till about 10:45 or so. We'll give you guys a little break. We'll come back and do, if there's any overflow content, we'll finish that up. And then we'll do some kind of case study or kind of talk through some of the specific tools that you guys are using and kind of use the Mankato Hub to kind of talk through some of the forecasting or sustainability plan work. That's a deliverable and that you guys all have. We'll then break for lunch. And then similar to yesterday afternoon, we're going to move you into breakout rooms by your kind of hub and have you guys kind of work together on some of this forecasting work, thinking about your sustainability plan, thinking about your kind of expenses and costing and things like that for the program year. So there'll be some work time, you'll get some support folks visiting you, and then we'll come back together and do some kind of large group sharing from each hub and talk about next steps. Sorry, I'm just going to move the chat on my other screen and then I'll be able to kind of see it a little bit as we move through. Oh, so this kind of what our financial statements are telling you. So we talked a lot about getting your business model on paper, right? And having a business model that works through that lean business canvas. At the Food Finance Institute, we often talk about things through that lens of profitability and investment, right? We want you to have a business model that is gonna make money and be sustainable for the long term, right? And so we often talk about this idea that in order to, as those food businesses grow in steps, or as you decide what is going to change in year 2, year 3, you may need some additional money to come in, right? For you to get to those next stages of growth, right? And in order to attract that money, right, you need to have an investable business model, whether that money is from a sponsor, a grantee, a a donor, whomever it is, right? Like they're making an investment in your business. And so this kind of goes back to that defensively unique proposition, business proposition. What makes you defensively unique? This goes back to having the right target customers, showing that there is that demand for the business, for the products and services you're selling. So you have that sufficient market, you have the right brand, you can show that you have the staff and support to do what you're doing. And then that you have access, right? That you can fund the growth that you need. So if you decide you need a truck that costs $10,000, that you have a way, you have some mechanisms or some options to make that happen, right? And so keeping that's what we mean when we start to talk about an investable business model. It's kind of just reframing some of the work we talked about yesterday, and understanding that our ability to talk about our business model to our board or other folks helps us generate the support we need to keep our business going. Another way, and some of the kind of what's behind, right, that business model is a lot of the financial statements and benchmarks that assess the health or the state of the business, right? And so we're going to be digging a lot deeper into some of those things today. So some of the ways that you kind of determine if you have an investable business model, right? Like things you can kind of ask yourself if you're thinking about this is knowing how your business is going to make money, right? So knowing that if you are selling market shares and you're selling wholesale, or you're, using your online hub, right? That that you've priced those items in such a way that when they sell them, you're making money on the sale, right? So you're accounting for all the components of that box, from labels to packaging to product. You're giving yourself some margin or some profit on it that can cover labor, marketing, other things. So you kind of understand how you're going to make money. Your story or what you do is compelling, that you have financial statements. So you're kind of tracking those sales, you're tracking your costs, you're tracking your expenses. You kind of can look at that picture of the business through financial statements, and you know that they make sense, that you understand what's happening, and that they're up to date, right? So that if you're trying to figure out how is my market hub doing, you want to be able to see a report or look at something that's going to tell you how you're doing in March 2022, in March 2022, or April 1st, 2022. You want to be able to know in some sort of real time how you're doing so that you can best plan for the future, not in 2 months from now, right? Because you won't be able to know if there's any issues or concerns. And having sort of these best practices and things in place and up to date helps you start to know if you're going to have a need for additional cash, right? So it'll help you know if you're going to have more expenses than you have cash in the bank account, and you need to make a plan for getting sponsorship dollars or getting some more revenue in to keep your business going. So to start, we're going to look at the income statement, or this might be called a profit and loss statement, but it's essentially the statement that tracks all your income or sources of revenue, all your expenses, and then you'll also see cost of goods sold. And so cost of goods sold are expenses related to the production, to the cost of producing the services or products you sell. So those specific costs. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these and kind of make them hit a little bit more home to your situation, right? And so, but the idea here is that you have, all your sources of revenue. You're tracking the inputs into the products you're selling, so that cost of goods sold. You're understanding your gross profit, and you're understanding kind of all the expenses, so you can kind of get to that net income number, right? And so ideally, we like to see this by month for the first year that you're kind of really planning, and then rolled up into years for the next 2 years. And you want to be able to see, often you want to be able to see sales will start off slow and then increase as you do more marketing and promotion around it. And this kind of becomes a data narrative, right? To support that lean business model canvas or that business plan that you're talking about, right? And so for you guys, right, for your market hubs, you're kind of earned your income. We have those earned revenue sources. So you have your online sales, you might have your market share boxes, you have your wholesale sales, You'll have donations, grants, and contracts. You might have sponsorships in here. You might have in kind as part of your revenue. And you'll have a different percent allocation to some of these, right? There are some markets that are really leaning into wholesale sales, right? Maybe more than market share boxes or other things, in which case your wholesale sales are going to have the majority of your revenue in there. But the idea here is that you start to look at when your revenue and expenses are going to hit by month. So you can start to get a feel for what resources are being needed throughout the season to support your hub and within certain line items, right? And so up here, we kind of have your incomes groupings will probably be fairly similar across hubs, but you might see some fluctuation. If somebody is choosing not to do wholesale sales, you don't need that income line, right? If someone is choosing not to do market share boxes, you might not have that income line. So you'll kind of figure out how that will map for you. And then you'll want to get a feel for how you're forecasting your contribution from each of these revenue lines. When it comes to expenses, you'll want to similarly get a feel for what are the expenses you can expect to incur as a hub. If you've been around for more than 1 year, you'll have some historical data. If you are new this year, you'll have historical data from other hubs, right? That will help you figure out what to plan for in your expenses. And things you'll want to think about is if there's seasonality, right? Like your hub manager, as a hub manager, you're probably working less hours in January and February, more hours as the season picks up. Maybe you're less in the fall and winter, or maybe it's consistent if you have a year-round market, but kind of thinking through how seasonality layers over expenses and figuring out the frequency of which some expenses hit. So if your online ordering platform is $750 and that expense hits in March, then you can plan or kind of see where that goes in your income statement kind of forecasting. And so this, I sent out this kind of initial draft of a farmer's market hub expenses just from some conversations with Sarah and the team. But this might be a good way to think about, okay, what are some of the expenses I know happen? When do they occur and how much are they? And then you can start to input these into the proper like expense lines on your income statement. And so I know a lot of folks mentioned different insurance they have to carry, right? So you might have more than one. You might have an insurance due in December that's $185. You might have a like liability insurance that's $300 that's due at a different time, but kind of getting a feel for what these expenses are. And then knowing when they, oops, wrong way. Oh dear, giving you guys some teasers here. And then knowing where they hit on those expense lines will help you kind of start to see where your net income is falling, right? So that net income on the bottom is your total income minus your cost of goods sold and minus your expenses, right? So right now we don't have all your expenses in, but we also don't have, this revenue is probably not accurate. And so you can see that each month we're losing money, but ideally, as you are in business longer, as you start to increase sales, you'll start to see that flip to a positive number would be the goal, right? So cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold includes any expenses directly related to selling your products or services. So in your case, that might be ingredients. So produce or items you purchase from your vendors, any packaging you need for those items once you get them from a vendor. So if they have to go in a cloth bag before they go to a consumer, or if they go into a plastic crate for a market box to go to someone, if they go into a plastic bag with a label, then a crate, kind of anything that goes into the packaging of that item to enable it to be sold becomes part of cost of goods sold. Labor, but label directly related to kind of packing or aggregating products to make them able to be sold. So And then if you needed some infrastructure or cooler that enabled sales. So like if you had to store inventory, if you had to put it in a cooler, if you had to, rent space, we know a lot of these costs are subsidized in your case. But if they weren't, or maybe Beverly, you probably might have a portion of it that you're allocating, or maybe it's subsidized by another space, but that might be another thing that you kind of would think about in your cost of goods sold. And what's important about this is that this number, this cost of goods sold number, is what really helps you figure out if you're pricing your products correctly, right? If your pricing makes sense. And so to kind of help you get those cost input data, I just kind of brought in a couple small tables, right? And so I know that Renewing the Countryside has like some price list files for you to kind of fill out, right? But ideally, you're going to have a price list from your vendors, right? That's going to show you the items that you're buying for your market hub that you're reselling either to the customer, to that wholesale client, to whomever it is, right? And so you want to know what your set of items are that you're purchasing and what they cost you, right? And so you might have organic carrots and you'll want to figure out a way to organize them so you can clearly search. And hopefully this dovetails nicely with how you're using your online platform, because you're going to input items into that platform and maybe you can log them and then export a list. But I think there's some way to leverage some of that infrastructure so there isn't maybe a lot of manual duplication. But the point being is that you want to understand what you have available to you and who you're sourcing it from, who's providing it, and then what the price is to you, right? And so let's say vendor A is going to sell you organic carrots. Maybe there's specific variety or color information that you add there, and they have a wholesale price that's $1.75. And maybe they're selling it at the market to the consumer that walks up to their stall for $2.50. Then ideally, hopefully, you're getting that carrot at wholesale price for $1.75. And then you can figure out your platform price from that wholesale price so that you're competitive with that consumer, with that end consumer price that's at the vendor table, right? That would be the ideal situation, right? Is that you're able to, because you want your pricing to be competitive to match other pricing is a goal, or you need to be able to account for an additional increase if you have it, or pass it on to someone else. Like maybe the buyer is paying that for a convenience charge. If you have to buy it at $2.50 and then you have to add your markup on top of that, and maybe that can go on too. So, but you want to be able to think through that aspect of your price list. So you have your ingredients. For your packaging, you'll want to know every time you place an order for a packaging item, right? Maybe you buy a corrugate box from Uline or from a local vendor, right? If you place that order, what are you buying? How much did it cost you? So what does that end up being your price per unit? And then you'll know that every time you're creating an item that uses a box, that you need to add in that per unit cost of the box or the label or the bag, whatever it may be.
Crazy day.
So just another thing that you'll want to make sure that you're aware of or documenting or tracking it somewhere. And then similarly for labor, right? I think you guys have different sheets where you're logging labor of who's working each market. And so as you do that, you might add notes or think about who is actually packing market boxes, like who is doing work that is contributing to the ability to sell products, because you can then code that labor to the cost of the product, right? So if you have volunteer 1 who spent 4 hours packing market boxes and you notate that, you'll then know that that is a part of creating this item, right? Versus someone who's managing the info tent, that's kind of coming into the kind of standard other expenses of running the business. Or maybe the hub manager is doing 50% of that work and a volunteer is doing 50% work, but it just might be a coding or categorization you want to be aware of on those labor sheets, because then you can go back and kind of see. And this isn't something like if you log it and then maybe you look at it, once every couple of months just to see where it's falling, just to get a handle on what it is, versus like being super doing it like every week, or maybe you do it every week for the first month just to kind of get a feel for what it's landing at. And then you do it again at the end of the season to see if there's comparisons. But these are just some ways of kind of thinking about it and how you might track or be aware of what these costs are actually doing. Because then once you have that data, you can start using it to really price out what it costs you to create an item. So for example, if you were building out a market share box, right? You would have the items in the market share box, the ingredients, how much they cost you. Ooh, pardon me. The cost of that box. If there were a label or bag, you would add that in. You'd get to your total cost. You'd get to your price that you're selling it for. So if you were selling it for $20, this is really high. There's clearly not enough expenses in here. If you got this done, this would be great. But the general idea in here would be is that once you get your price, you understand the profit you're making. So if you're making $9.89, so that 20 minus $10.10, you're making $9.89. That means your margin is 49% and your markup is 97%. But that's just because this cost and this price, right? Normally this cost is probably going to be closer to like, I don't know, 16, 17, somewhere around there. But this will give you an idea of how you can play with like, what are all those components in my market box? What is my cost? And then what in reality can I sell it for? And then ensuring that you're making enough money down here, that you're A, have a competitive price, and B, ideally, the remainder is covering your other expenses, right? And this would be the same for, oh, I think I have this as the next slide, pricing. This would be the same as you think about going into wholesale, right? So similarly, if you were to think about pricing for wholesale, again, you have to be cognizant of that end consumer price, right? So if a consumer is getting a carrot for $2.50, that's kind of what they're used to paying, right? You kind of need your cost to be around $1.75 and maybe even a little less if you're selling into a retailer who needs to take a 35% margin. So if a retailer buys a carrot from you at $1.75, they want to make a 35% margin, let's say, and sometimes that's higher, maybe 40%. That retailer is going to sell that carrot for $2.69, right? And if the consumer is used to paying $2.50, you want that to be able to hit in the ballpark. So they are buying a correct product. And if it's organic or has a different value proposition or is local or is a specialty grocer, sometimes there's some wiggle room here, but you just want to be mindful of the fact that you need to be getting your products and able to price it in such a way that who you're selling it to can add their margin, get their margin they need and add the markup on it.
I guess, could I quick add, this is Bjorn.
Yes.
I had a talk with the school nutrition director yesterday, and so she's actually gonna work on giving me her price that she would like to get it landed at. Like,
there you go.
And then from that, I can then assess what margin I could take from that.
Crazy burying it.
And then give that information to the farmer is kind of my plan. So kind of getting that final price from the retailer and working backwards is kind of my strategy.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's a really great point, Bjorn. Like if you're having those conversations with a retailer, particularly an institutional buyer or somebody who buys in volume, knowing what you're competing against is super helpful, but also making sure you understand like what the product is they priced you for, right? So if they gave you the carrot price from Sedesco that is, not local or organic, right? You'll just want to know so that if you're talking to your farmer and it's organic and local and their price is a little higher, does that increase? Can you get some additional premium based on their commitment to supporting the local food system, right? So there's an element of that you just want to be cognizant of, but that's a great way to back end into it to see what you're able to make work with that partner. Yeah, and that's also a good point too, Allison, is that as you're figuring out what they're quoting, sometimes they could be quoting like a peeled or pre-cut or bagged, but you may expect that when you talk to them, but just making sure that that part of it is clear so that you're doing an apples to apples or carrot to carrot comparison.
And that's one of the survey questions that we have for the buyer survey when you're working with buyers is, are you willing to share that price list? And because it's listed on there, it makes it easier to ask that question. Bjorn, I'm curious how you felt asking for that price list, how that went, just so you can share with everybody.
Yeah, I thought the conversation overall went pretty well. It was towards the end, and we had discussed throughout that, the supply currently isn't there, and that's like the goal that I'm working towards. And her as a school and wanting this program to work would like to see too. And so I was just like, with that, I need basically, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically, I need to get buy-in from farmers. And one way that would help would be to just relay information as to what pricing they could be getting participating in this program. And then I also just said, me personally, with trying to create how I can make this work best, it would help me with sort of what we're looking at for pricing and volume. And then I did ask to, like if they need the items to be processed or anything like that, then they've got the kitchen. And she said, we'll make it work to basically take in local products. Because I asked, about labor issues and things like that and how they were doing. And so yeah, it seemed like she was on board, pretty much from the start. We kind of had a similar connection. She used to work with Minneapolis Public Schools, and which is a huge farm to school program that I'm involved with. So we had some familiarity through that. So it was a pretty good, easy conversation, I thought.
Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. And a great way to, find that connection to see how you can, as you're creating that relationship, that's the important piece of it. And then that pricing piece coming up, it's a little awkward asking if they can share that pricing, but it gives us an idea. The pricing is the elephant in the room when you're talking with your different institutions, and you can say that to them. That is the elephant in the room, and it's something that farmers are uncomfortable having the conversation. Buyers are uncomfortable with it, and so this is a really important piece of it. And when we're talking about the margin side of it and what part of that we bring into it, it does get a little complicated. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example, because you'll find those folks who really do want to champion local food. They want to make it work, and they're going to be open and share with you. And it's good to understand, right, where both sides are coming from. And Kathy made a good point here, right? As you start to do your pricing and start to see where things are falling, you can start to get a picture of opportunities where you can like line price or blend pricing, right? So let's say you're looking at your market share boxes across like a few weeks, and they're falling in at 14 or 15 or 13, right? Like you're probably line pricing your market share boxes, right? They're one price for all weeks, and you're making up. Some weeks you're getting less, some weeks you're getting more, but as a whole, right? As a whole set, you're getting a certain amount of markup or margin that you're planning on receiving to make your business work. And similarly, maybe you decide you're selling 10 items wholesale, right? And carrots and broccoli and cauliflower have a little higher price and some others have a little lower price. And then you average out your pricing per pound because folks are buying them together and it balances. So you can do I think once you get the data and you start to look at it, you can start to see what makes sense and what is going to incentivize your buyers or that target customer to purchase from you, and like what narrative really supports that. And so I think you'll have a lot of great resources in this group as you guys are navigating this. But just kind of knowing these are some of the things people are thinking about, right? Delivery might be in here. Thinking about delivery and freight is another thing, right? That you might have to add on to your pricing too. Yeah. I think that's good on that for the moment. I'd be remiss if I didn't add in something about just kind of food safety tracking and quality, right? Because as you're creating these products and selling them, you want to, again, make sure you have a way to manage quality so that you get returned, your customers return, right? You get continued sales after you put the work in to secure a sale. And then you also want to have, from a food safety and kind of tracking side, there is a traceability arena where you need to know who supplied what and where it went. And I know, Sarah, you guys touched on this in your initial training. Do you want to add any comments about this traceability side or tools that you have for them on this while we have this point up?
All I would say is that this is where our online sales platform is one of the more important pieces of it. Is let's bring it back to that where you can see one step forward because you can see who the buyer is, and you can see one step back because you can see who the farmer is that it's coming from. And so utilizing that online sales platform. And if anybody talks to you, specifically your licensor, about food safety and tracking, reference that, say that, you know, the online sales platform is going to be tracking one step forward and one step back. And do you guys understand what that means? Like that one step forward and one step back? I say that as a, you know, we are food safety trainers, but I don't want to make assumptions that that makes sense. And so is there questions on that piece?
Is that in the supply chain? Are you talking about? Because that is a new term for me. So yeah, one step back in the supply chain. Who are you getting it from? What are they doing? And then one step forward, meaning
Who it's going to. And that's a great question, Kathleen. And that's what my concern was, is sometimes we're using terms that are so common in our world, but maybe not in, I didn't know what it meant when I first started doing it. So yes, when it comes to the supply chain, like if, let's say that Sarah George's farm has tomatoes that end up having a foodborne illness in it, I need to know exactly who received the tomatoes that came from my farm. God forbid tomatoes from my farm got somebody sick. Traceability is a piece of this, and we need to be able to track where those tomatoes went as a food hub. Now that we are in that role, it's a critical component and it's a required piece of it. But as long as you put everything in the online sales platform through Open Food Network or local food marketplace, then you would have that. However, market share boxes are different, because if you're aggregating market share boxes, then you would need the spreadsheet that Sarah showed. If you go back to that spreadsheet screen, Sarah, yes, that one. So now you're going to see that in each box, this is actually, here's the zucchini that came from DNS Gardens. That's my farm. And you're going to see the Good Turn Farm had some cucumbers that were in market share box 5. I know that in every single box, so every customer that received those items, so now I know all 13 of the individuals. Line E is the number of boxes I had. So I know that all 13 of the individuals that received those boxes received zucchini from my farm, and they also got blueberries from Wheatfield Hill Organics, for example, and I would be able to trace that to all 13 of those individuals. So traceability is a piece. And if you're doing market share boxes, you would have to have a separate spreadsheet outside of Open Food Network. And I see Jane, you are ready to talk. I'm going to pass it to you.
Yep. So, so the one step forward thing trips people up a little bit sometimes when we're talking about retail sales. With the market share boxes, you do have that other spreadsheet Sarah was talking about, and so you're able to track your one step forward to those retail customers because you know who subscribed to a market share box. But typically the traceability happens in the wholesale supply chain, and once it gets to retail in a grocery store, for instance, a supermarket like Cub doesn't track which item is going to each individual customer going out the door. So in that way, our Open Food Network platform is a little better than grocery store tracking because we can track individual customers. But just so you're aware that typically in the retail setting, the tracking of individual customers coming into a store is not something that happens or that's expected. It's the wholesale one step forward and one step back that is expected.
So like if you sold those tomatoes to Willie Street Co-op, you would have to let Willie Street Co-op know that those tomatoes had an issue, and they would probably put in their reader and social media, these tomatoes have an issue. If you bought them, we just want to let you know. But they probably don't have a way to email whomever bought them, but they're going to promote and do their due diligence based on what a supplier or vendor tells them. Kent, it looks like you have a hand up as well. Hopefully we can hear you.
Yes.
Yay!
Yes, if I remember correctly, if a vendor is selling in person at the market because they're selling retail directly to the customer, they don't have to worry about the forward traceability, even though sometimes we all know who buys what. But is that correct, Jane?
Yeah, that's correct, Ken. And yeah, that's what I'm saying. Any of those retail situations, you're not expected to track exactly which item went to individual retail customers. Traceability is in the wholesale chain, except that when you're talking about retail market share boxes, you do actually have that information of what customer was getting them. But if you think about having market share boxes that get purchased by another community entity who's funding them, like the Aiken situation where it's Aiken County Care that was actually buying the boxes, and then Aiken County Care had the list of all of the people who were getting them. The market was actually the wholesaler. And so their one step forward was selling those boxes to Aiken County Care. And then Aiken County Care was the retailer, and they had the list of who got them. So if there was a problem with an item in the boxes, then Aiken County Care would get notified by the market, and Aiken County Care would be notifying the individuals who got the boxes. So yeah, that probably made it as clear as mud for everybody. But basically, if you're a retailer, if you're a market booth vendor or a retail store, you don't have to track every item as to which individual customer took it.
Thank you, guys. I think that's a good conversation just because this is an important element. And I think as you're working through your business model, working with the group and technical assistance providers, if you have any questions on that, just make sure it's something that you clarify and you understand, because once you document like, okay, this is my case, my use case, here's how I'm selling, so this is where food traceability matters, then you'll know. You can kind of go from there as you're managing the rest of your business. So we will move on from there. But yeah, an important conversation and thing to just know how it applies to your unique situation. All right, so this slide is just calling out that gross profit margin line on the income statement. And so this is the taking your sales minus your cost of goods sold, right? So it's knowing how much money you have left after you remove the cost of kind of producing that product or service you're selling. And so that becomes what's going to cover all your other kind of operating or selling in general administrative expenses, and what's going to give you your profit at the end, your net income, right? And so this is a good measure or number to pay attention to. When we talk to kind of food businesses or kind of growing things, we say that you really want your gross, this number to be 35 to 50% of your sales. And so that's kind of your target, but often when you start, it's going to be higher, right? Because you're going to have more expenses, or you're not getting things in bulk the way you might as you grow or increase your sales, or you're figuring something out. But that kind of is a good benchmark or metric that people will look at when they're looking at their profit and loss or their income statement. It also helps you know or kind of target like where your costs of goods sold are at. So if they're too high, you can start to think about ways that you might be able to lower your cost of goods sold. You know, if you're buying boxes, maybe I don't know if this project is buying like one big order and distributing it to all of the hubs, right? Which would get you volume orders and your price per packaging unit down, right? So kind of those bulk buying opportunities. Or maybe you have a partner in the community who donates some element of packaging to you because they're a community partner. And so that reduces your COGS because of that nonprofit mission kind of in-kind donation. Maybe the vendor is giving you, that lower wholesale pricing, or you've shown that you're getting them a larger volume. So they work with you on pricing a bit. So kind of thinking through ways, and that will directly impact that gross profit number. So then just showing you kind of where that is on this kind of income statement forecasting worksheet that I sent out today for you guys. You'll kind of see it by month, you'll see it by year, and then you can start to look at it for year 2, year 3, right? So getting that 3-year picture tends to be a really good business practice. Of doing it by month for this year, because you have to think in terms of what's happening this season or this year, and then starting to look at what that could look like in the next 2 years as you're planning for your business. So yeah, I was talking a little bit about some of this stuff, like improving your gross margin. You might reduce your cost of goods sold, right? Sometimes another good reason we do this by month is so that you can see seasonality, right? And so you might see some opportunities to, if something is cyclical, to even it out across time. You might see those opportunities to increase, to scale, right? Which would lower some of your cost of goods sold contributions. Yeah, so this is some of the stuff we talked about opportunities to get lower pricing on packaging, get in-kind donations, get vendors to work with you on price by the value you're offering or the sales connections you're getting them. Things like that. So when we get down to the expenses, this is important to kind of know all those additional inputs that are on top of creating those products and services it takes for your business to run. Often folks will call some of this SG&A, which is kind of selling and general administrative expenses. You'll have operating expenses, kind of these SG&A expenses, marketing and sales, right? What are you spending to get more customers into your outlets or revenues, right? And so often as you're doing this, you'll want to make sure that your expenses are matching your expected sales, right? So if you add wholesale in June, right, all of a sudden you might have an increase in outreach or staff or certain expenses, right, to meet the needs of that new sales channel. You might have samples, right? You might be getting samples from your farmers so that you can drop them off and make sales calls. So kind of thinking through what those expenses might look like and how they map to those different sources of revenue and when you're expecting to start deploying that strategy. So you guys have some initial worksheets from the project team that calls out some of these expenses so that you can start to know what these look like and how to plan for these. And then you can start to tailor them for your hub to see if you have different expenses. Maybe you don't have one of the expenses, but it's a good kind of baseline to start thinking about like what's relevant to your hub, what might be missing. And again, when does it start to hit and how does it total for the year? This I'm going to kind of skip over, but essentially this is related to often more likely food brands or like a value-added producer who's trying to go regional or national, and they're trying to pay attention to measures of valuation or certain growth strategies so that they can attract investment and kind of become a bigger brand. on the income statement. And so I'm going to kind of skip through it, but if this is of interest to you, this earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization is sort of a measure of what a business is making before the cost of money. So like before the cost of paying for interest on a loan or paying for debts or financing or depreciation. But don't worry if this doesn't mean anything to you. It does not need to. And then the final one on here is, of course, that net income, right? And so this is just showing you if you made money in that period of time, right? And so this is something to just track and be mindful of. And again, it may not be positive right away because it takes a little bit to get, you often have more expenses as you're getting up and running, but kind of managing this because you do want to ideally see this hit the positive, break even or hit positive, right, in that 3-year trajectory. So that's often why we're looking out 3 years, because we want to see a method or mechanism for that net income to be 0 or ideally to be positive, right? So that it's contributing some money back to you to reinvest in the business or to, support other functions of the work that you do. Okay, so there's another key financial statement called a balance sheet. And this balance sheet kind of works with the income statement, right? To give you a position, let you know a snapshot of your assets and liabilities at a point in time, right? And so these are often super relevant for businesses who have a lot of infrastructure, right? Like if you have large equipment that you have to spend money on, if you have a building or a lease, if you have a truck though, or a vehicle or something like that, that would be sitting on your balance sheet. Your cash, any cash you have in your account is going to flow into a current asset on your balance sheet. And so this is an important kind of state of the business of where you're at. And so and it is often shared if you were trying to get some debt or partner with a local bank or something like that. They would want to see the position of your balance sheet as they're making a decision to extend a line of credit or a little loan or something like that. And similar, all your vendors should have this income statement and balance sheet too, because they want to know how their business is doing and kind of what that position looks like for them. So I put sort of a balance sheet forecast in that worksheet I sent out to you. This is also called a statement of financial position, depending on, these are framed a little differently depending on if you're a for-profit or nonprofit business. So kind of answering that question of what your business structure is might influence how some of this terminology or how you think about these things. So I know that some hubs are kind of part of the market as an LLC, I think. Some might be a nonprofit, some might be considering a cooperative. So some of that stuff might influence this, but what you'll kind of see here is your cash in your account showing up here. You'll see any accounts receivable as an asset. So if you are doing wholesale and you invoice that grocery store for a $200 sale, right? That's going to sit as an asset, an accounts receivable, because that's going to turn into cash when they pay you. But there's terms on it, right? It doesn't turn into cash until they pay you in, net 30 days terms or net 15-day terms. Or if you get them to pay on the platform up front and then you deliver, then great. Then maybe you don't have any accounts receivable. But that's sort of the function of kind of tracking those current assets that are going to turn into cash in the next year. You might also see large inventory purchases. So if in April you buy $1,000 of boxes, that's going to sit down as an asset on your balance sheet, and it's going to get relieved through cost of goods sold as you use one of those boxes to sell an item. So if you buy 500 boxes and then you sell 30 market share boxes in May, you'll kind of follow that through cost of goods sold as those sales happen. But that bulk purchase of inventory sits as an asset on your balance sheet. So those are some ways that I think these become relevant to you. Fixed assets are things that you normally are holding on to for more than a year. They're larger purchases. And so if you're, forgive my misspelling of vehicles there I'm seeing, but for example, like if you were to have a delivery vehicle or something like that, you might see that on here and have supplemental depreciation there. But I think these will probably be pretty simple for you. And because you don't have a lot of infrastructure, since you're leveraging existing infrastructure of the hub. But I think keeping this in mind and getting a picture of that, this kind of is another statement that completes that cycle. So the flip side of that assets is, and I probably should keep going because I'm talking a lot on that slide. But this is just some additional narrative on that current asset side, right? We talked about AR a little bit. Again, if you're getting payment right away on your hub, your accounts receivable is going to be pretty low, but you just want to be aware of that you might have some cash that isn't coming in, right? Because it's sitting there on an invoice, which can affect your cash flow and your ability to purchase things as you need to. Work in progress inventory, I was talking about a little bit. This is sort of that issue of boxes, or if you were buying ingredients that you were holding a bit before you package them up. But if you're buying like market share boxes, like broccoli and things for a market share box, you're packaging up that same day and then you're turning it out. It's probably gonna not sit on inventory because it's turning right away. But if you were buying like 300 jars of honey and you were using that for like a whole year of sales, it might sit here as a work in progress on inventory waiting to be sold. This, I don't know how much some of this will come in. I think it's really the packaging in here that becomes relevant. And we can talk about this more as we move into each of your kind of unique situations. But just to give you a general idea that you'll see some of this inventory stuff as an asset on a balance sheet, and then it's getting relieved through cost of goods sold is a big takeaway here. Finished good inventory, you might see, so like you might have work in progress and finished goods if you're making that value added product, right? You might be making or mixing or batching a salsa or have different components of a salsa before that salsa gets packaged into the jar and into the box and is ready to be sold. So you might have some stuff in work in progress and some stuff in finished goods. And so this might be more relevant to your value added farmers, or if you were deciding to do, which I don't know that any hubs are, if you were going to sell some sort of product that pulled inventory from all of your farmers and was shelf stable and you were selling it year round on your hub, on your market hub or something like that.
But don't do that because that would be holding product and they would talk to us about our license. So don't do that.
Yes, you're not. So yeah, that would add a whole
Yeah.
host of other licenses and expenses. So out of scope.
Yeah, we don't use the word storage, holding or staging for delivery.
Perfect. Yeah.
We may have gotten caught on that sticky wicket once before.
But this is why this group is so important, right? Because it's like, these are the things that's so helpful to have other folks unpack for you, because it can be overwhelming when you're sitting there being like, what can I do here? Okay, table that for now.
And it's just the word. Just don't use the word store.
Non-commercial and storage. We need to have like a no-no list that we'll share at the end. Okay, so, and part of the reason we talk about this a little bit too is that you can sometimes collateralize some of your current assets to access some sources of funding. And so that's what this note is kind of, this slide is talking about. If you had a lot of current assets, you might be able to leverage some percentage of them to support some debt, or you might recognize that you need some, because you have some funds tied up in those, you need some additional funding to support the fact that you have cash tied up in inventory. So you need some additional funding to help you buy more inventory and kind of keep that churning a little bit. We kind of talked about those bigger purchases that might fall under fixed assets. I don't think this will be super relevant unless somebody maybe like that vehicle thing becomes, if you guys were all sharing a delivery vehicle or something like that, that to me seems like something that could potentially be the most relevant here, but just knowing that's a way that you kind of leverage an asset like that would sit on the balance sheet, be depreciated accordingly, and be kind of tracked in that way to show where you're at. And then you would have some financing that helped you manage that. So you might have a longer term loan or something that was offsetting that purchase. And again, that's balance sheet is what is kind of capturing that and showing that state of the business. When we flip down to liabilities, you start to see accounts payable, right? So these are the things that you owe that you were invoiced and need to pay. If you're paying your vendors right away, like, you purchase from them on the market and you're paying them right away, you might not have any accounts payable. If you're paying your vendors like every 2 weeks, you're cutting them checks, you'll probably have some accounts payable liabilities sitting there for those couple of weeks. And so this is that picture of the money that you owe to your vendors. It's a picture of any kind of credit card debt you might have or other short-term debt that you might have that would kind of all be captured here in this current liability section. And then long-term liabilities, these might be some longer term debt or some things that you'd be using to finance more of those like fixed assets, right? So just kind of showing that check and balance between your assets and liabilities there. If you're a nonprofit, you're not going to have shareholder equity, right? Like nobody's owning that nonprofit, but you might see some like board loans or some sort of loans like that, right? You might look at restricted assets or unrestricted assets that are kind of contributing to your equity position or to your assets of the business. And so that's sort of another area that's captured here on your balance sheet. So in this example, you might see, right, like you might have your accounts payable, your credit cards, you might have an EBT POP or market box liability. I'm not sure how those clear out for you, but these are kind of spaces where you might see some of that stuff sitting here. You might get a short-term loan from a director. You might be tracking some of these net assets. Your net revenue will be in here. But then what this picture is doing, the point of the balance sheet, right, is it's your assets and your liabilities should match, right? So the balance sheet should check, be in balance. You should always have the same amount up in your assets. And it should also always be offset by your liabilities and equity. And so that is sort of the purpose of the balance sheet, how it works. And if you pull it at any time, it'll be a snapshot of where the business is at that day. So as your income statement, you might add up the total of each month. Your balance sheet is going to be, at the end of the year is going to equal what it did in December, right? It's going to match that last point in time. Okay, so balance sheet. The third statement that we talk about a little bit is a cash flow statement. So accounting software can do all of these statements for you. You can also do these a little bit for yourself as well. But the reason a cash flow statement is really important is that your income statement doesn't tell you how much cash is in your account and if you have enough cash to pay your bills, right? And so a cash flow statement will tell you how much cash you have at the end of a month or at the end of a period, and when you start to go negative. And when you start to go negative in a cash flow statement, that tells you that you need more money, that you need to raise more money, you need more revenue, you need an additional grant, you need a sponsorship, whatever it is, you need to cover that negative number with some source of revenue or funding. And so that's really what is great, or what is a really good point of having a cash flow statement or understanding how it integrates. So it thinks about operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities, and when those things are happening to give you that cash at the end of the period. And so again, if you're using an accounting system or software, you can run these reports automatically out of the system. And you can also similarly forecast these like you do a balance sheet and an income statement. You can also, if you're just starting up and you're just trying to figure out like, do I have enough cash to get me through the start of the season? Or I'm in kind of a touchy area and I just want to make sure that I'm doing okay. You can use what we call like a 13-week rolling cash flow and just really look at and this is a good way to chunk it out. If this is new to you, you can look at week 1 through say week 13 and really start to track like cash that's coming in, cash that's going out, and get the smaller picture of where your net cash is falling each week so that you can see, okay, for the next 3 months, I have enough cash, or nope, I see this space that there's an issue, right? So you might have, you'll have normally like a starting cash, you'll say cash in, I'm gonna get $500 from market share boxes, I'm gonna have to pay AP paid, I'm gonna have to pay $300 for ingredients and packaging, I'm gonna have to pay whatever for labor, and then you'll start to see kind of where your cash lands, where your starting cash is and what your net is. So it gives you that picture of what that churn is so that you can verify or confirm that based on when people are paying you and when you're paying other people, you have the cash to manage it, right? And we know sometimes this can be hard with like reimbursements. If you're getting grants and you know you have the money, often there might be reimbursement focused, right? And so maybe you know you're getting $10,000 from a grant, but you might have to pay that expense before you get the money from the grant. And so this is a way to help manage and make sure that you have the cash to pay those things until that money comes into your account. So
I see that Kathleen has a hand up.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, I
Kathleen.
didn't want to just jump in here because I'm taking it all in, but I was just looking for in these balance sheets and stuff, like your shrink or your spoilage or where you keep track of, with produce and perishable items, where you can track or how often you recommend tracking that or where this fits on the balance sheets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So often where I see kind of like thinking about shrink might be when I'm pricing my item. And so if I'm doing like my cost of goods sold here, as I'm figuring out the price of that carrot or that zucchini or that item, I might be adding in shrink into that cost, or I might be adding an extra line item for shrink in here to monitor in my cost of goods sold, which is a really great point, because if let's say you're processing something, right, you're often going to have a batch report. And in that batch report, you'll say, I brought in 500 pounds of broccoli. And then you'll say, you'll do your standard operating procedure for whatever you're doing to that broccoli. Maybe you're chopping it, and then you'll get your yield, right, which will be 450 pounds of broccoli. You'll have your shrink. You'll have what you had to pay for it, and you kind of use all of that to input into this cost of goods sold. And if that is a situation that folks are facing a lot, I can do some updates to better account for shrink in some of this stuff and send it back to you, because that is a really good point and a really good observation.
Really hoping we don't see a lot of it, but it does happen. And you have to be prepared when the school calls and says they have slugs in their lettuce or stuff like that, and be ready with those questions, because that does
Based
happen.
on a true story.
I was gonna say that might not have ever happened in my community.
Well, and that is
So-
almost, that's like the quality side, right? Like if you sell to somebody and they don't accept the order and you have to receive it in, then ideally you would have a mechanism to hopefully get your money back from the supplier, right? You can go that step back of saying this was rejected because of quality, or you're rejecting it before it goes to the buyer because it doesn't meet your product specification. It has an issue. And so you can kind of clear out the quality side of it, hopefully through some systems checks and specifications. And then shrink would be more of the, if you bought 50 pounds of broccoli from the market boxes, but you trim some component of it to make it, something like that, where you're doing something where the yield is different than what you purchased. Because hopefully you're purchasing from the farmer what you're going to use, but if you're doing an additional value add, you might see some shrink in there. But yeah, you have a lot of folks who have been through these things before. So just encourage you not to be overwhelmed by these. And if those situations coming up, know that they happen, and that you just have to thinking about that customer experience and how you support them. You just want to get the information, and then you can figure out the best way to handle it from, this financial side, from reporting side, from all of that, right? You guys are doing great. Thanks for hanging with me. We're getting close to a break. So know that that's happening. Hopefully you're drying well, doing things to busy your hands, enjoying your cold medicines. I think we've talked about this pretty well, but it's just kind of knowing that there is sometimes delays, right? And when it's just reinforcing that there is delays in when you receive cash and when you have to pay for things. And so it's really important to know your cash flow cycle and to be able to be aware and to be able to manage that, particularly when you're just starting out. You'll have a limited amount of funds in your accounts, and you'll kind of have to manage how things are moving.
On that one, before you skip
yeah.
over that is something that took me by surprise as part of this Food Hub project. When I was working with the schools in the beginning, just know that it's not uncommon for schools to go 8 or even 12 weeks before they submit payments. However, I didn't realize you could have individualized conversations, and I was not as bold. I was like, I want to get into the schools. I want to make this happen. And I didn't go back and ask those questions, like, should we have this conversation, when that money should be due? And I think it's an important thing to know up front. And when I went back and started asking the question, like, do we have to wait 8 or 12, or even we had gone 16 weeks without payment? Farmers can't wait that long. They just simply can't. And our markets can't front that funding. And so we have to think through and ask those questions, like, what is that turnaround? And it doesn't matter if you put this deadline is 10 days from the time you receive it. You're just going to have to continue that communication. And oftentimes it's not the food service director that's making the payment. They submit it and then they're out of it. So they can follow up and make sure you get that payment. And that's something I didn't realize is the food service director. I mean, duh, it makes sense, right? The food service director isn't cutting the check to the farmers or to the market. So following up and creating that relationship with your food service director, we're telling you, look, go wholesale, but don't sit on that and think you have to wait 8, 12, or 16 weeks to get paid. It happened to me, and I went 12 and 16 weeks, and that's not necessary.
And I think that's a really good lead in or call to just being really clear on your communication of like, hey, we have to pay our farmers in net 14 days. We'd love to be able to give you net 14 days terms. If that doesn't work, we're going to give you 30, but you have to pay. Like, who do I follow up with? And maybe you relieve that burden from your food service director and get that accounting contact so that you can call. But that's, in order to do that, you have to be managing, right, your open accounts receivable. And so that if things are aging or past time, that you have somebody who's doing that follow-up. But I think those are really great points of just knowing that you can set terms, you can be really clear what you need and what your farmers need. And that, again, there is sometimes that gap. And so you need to be able to manage it, which is a good lead in similarly to sort of this accounting systems slide I put in here, because there are ways, like there's a lot of spreadsheets and tools we're using, but there's also accounting systems that really can help us best manage a lot of this stuff we're talking about, right? QuickBooks is a really common paid system that we use with a lot of our nonprofits and food brands and folks we work with use, right? Has the chart of accounts. It helps you log and write checks. It pulls those reports for you, that income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. I know Kent was kind enough to talk me through what he's using at Grand Rapids, and I know he uses a free version that's kind of similar to QuickBooks called GNU Cash. And so I think, you know, having that conversation about, are you guys able to get into a system and kind of similarly organize your chart of accounts, then I'll kind of start to use these systems in similar ways. And then all of a sudden your reporting becomes kind of able to lay on top of each other's and be pulled up to tell a big story, right, about the impact of the hubs. And so I mentioned, yeah, so these really good pluses, right? Consistent categorization and coding for year over year comparison, right? So if you're consistently putting things in a same account, you can now see what trends and compare things year to year or month to month, right? They have that ease of reporting. You can pull out all of those statements we looked at today. You can compare them to your budget projections and your forecasts. You can compare them to the previous year. They become really good historical data kind of keepers, right? So if there's a transition in staff or there's you lose some paperwork, right? You have a digital record of everything that happened, and it's something that can easily be passed on from you to someone else. It's a good business practice, best practice, a good check and balance, right? To make sure things are getting entered. But it does require, similar to spreadsheets, right? Data entry, management, and oversight, right? So I think this is a conversation to just have within your hubs, within your kind of peer groups, and just kind of see what you're able to make happen with these sort of accounting systems. I think that there are, I have a slide in here, I thought it was right after, but there's different ways, right, that you can find support for this, right? So when we talk about like governance or financial governance of the work you do or your hubs of your markets, right? A lot of you might have boards or advisory teams. And if there's if you're lucky enough to have a treasurer or somebody that's accounting savvy that can help you with some of this stuff, who's maybe able to take a leadership role on this, maybe there's a volunteer in the community that wants to help. I mean, maybe there's yes, I love it. QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online are super friendly. It sounds like Beverly's using those. I think sometimes even young adults, right, who are in business school or in MBA programs or like nonprofit leadership programs, if they have an opportunity to come set up the books and like learn that as in class and kind of manage some input, if you don't have anything set up, there may be opportunities to leverage something like that, who's getting support from, you know, an expert in class, or maybe from a board or treasurer member, but they're doing some of the setup and data entry work. So just kind of thinking through how you can leverage your resources to maybe enact a system like this, because it does help. It's very helpful for both reporting and the long term. And one thing I just wanted to call out in them is that they help you kind of standardize that chart of accounts, or kind of how you're coding those expenses, revenue accounts, assets, liabilities, equity. And that can be really valuable, just because then you're all talking about the right items coded to the right things. You're kind of doing those comparisons of when you talk insurance, right? Or when you talk licenses, you kind of know where those are being recorded and what's in each of those accounts. And I mentioned this earlier, some of this like business structure stuff that you guys are figuring out will impact how you set up some of these things, or might influence how you're thinking about this. So I think you guys are getting close to figuring that all out, but just kind of keeping that in mind in the back of your business model and some of these infrastructures, is that you'll have that question of like, what is that actual business structure? And then how does that impact some of these systems? Let's see, what do we need to talk about here? So often when we're talking to folks who have maybe been in books or haven't been in their books a long time, we might talk about kind of key signs that you might want to go back into your books or talk to accountant, or kind of look at fixing your systems, right? And it could be that you don't have inventory on your balance sheet. You can't pull a balance sheet because you don't have one. So you don't have that representation of where things are at today. You're just filing taxes, but you don't understand kind of the day-to-day benchmarks or financial management issues of, say, cash flow or needing additional funds, right? I added one on the bottom. Sometimes we see an unclear separation between lines of business. And so depending on how you've set up your market hub or your farmer's market, are they separate or are they similar, right? So you might have a separate set of books for your market hub and a separate set of books for your farmer's market. And so being clear what expenses live where, so you can understand, properly assessed if you're making money, and you're recognizing all of the proper expenses and incomes. Or if the farmer's market is subsidizing part of the hub, like you just want to make sure the books are set up to match your situation. We see something similar with farms who are also value-added brands, right? Where they have a set of books for like the grain they grow, and then they have a different set of books, right, for the flour they sell, right? Because they're selling that grain to like the mill, it's getting packaged into that finished item. And so there's some separation that happens, so that you can, again, best assess the success of those individual businesses. Yeah, I think that is what I want to say on that one. This was that slide I was looking for before, just kind of thinking about if we're talking about these accounting systems, if we're talking about kind of how we can manage this data, it's sort of like, yeah, is there a skill on your board? Do you have that treasurer? If you're large enough that you have subcommittees, even better, but that I know is often not the case when we're talking about these markets. So if you can get that kind of finance champion or somebody with that acumen that can help with some of this stuff and maybe support a volunteer or staff member in learning some of this, because it is a really great professional development opportunity for folks who want to understand books or who have that spreadsheet numbers, like love that special love for spreadsheets and numbers. Those people are out there. Trying to see if I see anybody smiling on the 4 photos I see on my screen right now.
I'm smiling, but it doesn't mean that I love them.
It means you know someone who loves them, or you.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I do really like when they balance, like that problem solving is super satisfying when you're like, I figured it out. So I am a little bit of that nerd, I think.
Good for you.
Yes, these kind of slides, the last couple of slides are just speaking to, again, like all of these things come together similar to your business plan, right? To make a financial plan, right? And so having this data in these numbers is like that check and balance for your business plan, that your business is going to work, that you are able to be profitable, to kind of make your business work. So these things go together and really tell the story and that journey of your business. And they help you similarly get that funding or support you need from the community, because it shows that you're really clear on what you're doing, what you need to achieve your plan of what you're doing, both in kind of both that narrative and both in this kind of financial data way. Let me just look back through here. I'm gonna come back to that in just one second and show this really quick. So we talked a lot about revenue. And you may or may not need to break this out super itemized, but I did put a sales forecast in that forecasting sheet you got. Sometimes the first time you're thinking about this, it can help to think about these, like I have it broken out in the bottom, where you think about online sales and you might have to put like carrots, broccoli, whatever you're selling, and kind of see what you think each will contribute in each month, and then have that roll up to that top portion where it says online sales. Similar with market share boxes, similar with wholesale orders, you might have school district 1, restaurant 2, and kind of think about them each as an individual unit to help you see what's possible for each of those categories by month. As you start to build that out or get some history, it may be easier to go right up to that total revenue and know that my online sales are going to be $1,000 this month, $1,500 this month. But the idea here is that it kind of helps you plan for what those numbers might be each month. Okay, so then I'm gonna I think we're at 10:42, so I'm gonna end here for a moment, and then we'll move into a break and kind of come back. And so I I know that you guys all have a sustainability plan as one of your expectations or deliverables in this project work. And a lot of what we're talking about here today is going to help inform this sustainability plan, right? It will help you best know what you're putting in here, help you kind of plan or contribute to this. And so I wanted to put a snapshot of this up here and then maybe give Sarah or Kathy or anyone a minute to touch on this, or else we can come back and touch on this after break, whatever, Sarah, if you have a preference.
Wanted to see what Jane or Kathy thought.
I think we should hit it after break, and Sarah Larson, if we have a chance to do a quick check-in with you before we come back, I think that'd be good.
Perfect. So why don't we all take a break until 11, and then maybe Sarah, George, if you want to make a breakout room, or at least one, and then we can, you, me, Kathy, Jane can kind of jump into that breakout room. Room 1, joining. Okay.
Perfect. Sorry, we kept you on the hold there. Okay. Thank you for waiting. I hope that you were enjoying a conversation with each other.
Everyone's pretty quiet. I think we're all just trying to process. We're like, do we look like we've been traumatized, or our eyes are huge, or
A little bit, yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot of numbers and a lot of spreadsheet cells to look at.
I'll be honest, when Sarah came in and said hello this morning, she said, this is the financial version of a root canal. And I cringed.
I didn't hear that. Yeah.
My brain goes to kind of this blank space where it's like, well, you know, the Charlie Brown adult voices.
Yep.
When they're talking on the phone. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's just, that's where my brain, I have to really try hard to listen. I struggle. I'm like, because then I'm like, wah, 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 wah.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, am I going to retain any of this? I'm hoping that I'm just absorbing things.
So I think the important thing is that you have a team to support you, and Sarah's not just going to introduce us to this and then leave our side. There's going to be connection further down the road as we engage in this, and we're going to come up with real numbers. A lot of you, this is going to be the first time you're coming up with numbers, and so these spreadsheets and things that we're tracking will help you through those. We're not leaving you and saying, here, figure this out. We're here to help and guide and support you through this whole process. Introducing it very similar like we did with the orientation. Remember how overwhelming that felt? And we've taken these baby steps. A lot of you are like, I've got my right foot on the gas pedal and we're ready to roll. And some of you are thinking other things. So steady, slow and steady. So anyhow.
You guys are doing great. Like, you made it through the morning. That's a lot of like numbers and sheets, which can not be the most fun content, but it is important to just know, right, as we're thinking about those kind of parameters and benchmarks. So yeah, that's always like, getting through that is always like, Tara used to always call it the financial root canal day. And so that doesn't frame it well though, but like, yes, getting through it. But I think we're kind of entering the, like, let's kind of dig into some of these tools, how they apply to your kind of hubs, how you can think about these, how they look like when you're starting to use them and process them. And so I think what we'll do here for maybe the next 20 to 30 minutes is I'm going to share my screen and show the Farmers Market Food Hub forecasting sheets document that I shared with you. There is a V2 now though, and so you may get a link from Jane for this additional version that I'll be walking you guys through here in a moment. And I'm just gonna show you how some of these relate to each other and how you might think about the inputs to these spreadsheets. And so, and Sarah or Kathy or others might chime in with some guidance for numbers as I'm entering them. But really the point is just to kind of see how these might be used as you think about your hub. We'll then go to lunch. So you'll get another kind of 45 minutes to kind of shake it off, get some fresh air, get a fresh cup of tea, whatever it is you need. And then we'll come back and we'll go into breakout rooms, similar to what we did yesterday afternoon. And you'll spend a little bit of time in these forecasting worksheets, kind of thinking about just documenting some assumptions for your hub or your community. You can look back at your lean business model canvas. You can kind of, they might have, when you're in the countryside, they might have another tool or document they want you to kind of look at too, but we'll really spend some time working with those in the hubs, or if you're alone, we'll make sure you have a buddy with you to start to think about and process some of this stuff. And so, and all of this is with the caveat that when you're starting to put data down, we know sometimes you don't know, right? But we're just trying to capture something that could happen. And so that, and it may change, circumstances may change. Anyone who's had to forecast in the last 2 years during the pandemic has had to deal with this, right? Like you just kind of got to guess to the best of your ability. And then when things happen, you look back and see how close you are, what you learned from it, and think about the future, right, in new ways. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen correctly because I was now trained on this in Zoom. I think you guys are seeing my profit and loss by month statement. Is that correct? Excel file. I'm seeing a nod. Okay.
It's easier
excellent.
to read now.
Yay, I figured it out. So what I want to kind of point out on this spread, I guess the tabs are on this spreadsheet for you all are, there is this profit and loss by month tab. Anything that's yellow is an input, right? So this is letting you see by month that income, cost of goods sold, and expenses. There's a sales forecast tab. And so this is your revenue, right? Or your sources of funding. This is kind of where you might see that. Anything that's yellow is similarly an input here as well. So as you're thinking through those sources of funding or that different revenue you're expecting, you'll have your different buckets up here in that income line that will map or be similar, be exactly the same as what's on your profit and loss statement. And then as you start to think about what you expect to have happen, you can come down here in your sales forecast tab and start to plan for what sources of income or revenue you expect to see coming in for the 2022 year. As you input stuff down here, it'll pull into the top, that income on top there. So you'll see a total come down here, and then it'll pull into your income tab.
What program are you using for your spreadsheet?
This is Excel.
Okay.
But it will also should import into a Google Excel if you need it to. I am seeing one error in a formula here, but we'll come back to that. So this might be,
this spreadsheet is available on our website, and she's created this for each of us to use. And so just watching as she's doing this, it looks like we're going to have to do a update again, Jane. Apologize. But each of us will have the opportunity to do this. So Sarah Larson, if you could, because you're so tuned into this spreadsheet and understand it really well, if you could explain that one more time, like as you're choosing, where did you put that first 500? Okay, so showing that one more time.
Yeah, so you'll see you have itemized detail for each of your lines of revenue down here on the sales forecast. So you have online sales, market boxes, wholesale orders. So as you start to plan, so online sales aggregation, if you think in January you're going to make $500, you might put $500 here. You might put $250 here. You can start to play around with what you think you're going to make each month, and it will pull up into the top there.
So this is
You'll-
forecast. This is not actual sales. This is forecasted sales.
Correct. Yep. So this is what you expect to happen. You just have to, you're just kind of planning, you're looking at past data. If you have it, you're talking to another market that's similar to you to get a feel for what they might have seen. If you have no idea, you're just going to guess just so you have a target for what you have. But that guess is going to probably be based in something, right? You have a lot of other markets that you can talk to get a feel for what they've seen in those months, right? But it helps you just kind of get a feel for what you might expect here, right? And so similarly, you know, you can do that, you know, maybe you're not doing any market boxes in January, so that's $0, $0, $0. But maybe in April, you're gonna do 4 and you're gonna just see how it goes. And then you're gonna maybe be like, okay, I'm gonna increase that. I think I'm gonna try to stay at, this is assuming 4 times $25. So like your pricing is going to matter here, but you just start to kind of guess what you think that market share is going to be. Your wholesale orders, you can come down here and be like school 1. I'm hoping they start buying from me in May, and I'm hoping they spend $250. I'm hoping they order every month because they're going to do harvest of the month. They're going to buy an item and they're going to feature it in something in their cafeteria and give it as a snack to their students, right? So you would kind of plan it in there. Maybe you have restaurant 1. You've talked to them. They've indicated that they tend to average X amount of sales from somebody. You're talking to somebody new. You're hoping they start buying from you in May as well. And maybe they're going to spend $150 a month, right? You start to kind of see what that looks like as it pulls up on top here. And you start to see what % of sales contribution each of these funding sources has to your total sales.
There are a couple questions in the chat, Sarah. Number 1 was, is there, they're thanking you for the Google format, first of all. Willow and Google friendly format, which is fantastic. And Jane mentioned that we can download those from the website, but now that you've changed a few formulas, do we need that updated version? And then Willow and
I will give everyone an updated version by the time you get back from lunch.
You're awesome.
So
Thank you.
I will say, let's kind of plan on that. We'll replace, and sorry, when we're doing some live edits, it's like, wait, we got to step back and make sure that everything flows. So yep. I'll get it for lunch, but yes. Okay. Sorry. What was the other question?
Yeah, I'm going to answer Laura's first because I can answer that one. Do schools tend to have a summer break without buying food? And actually, that answer is no. There is an app you can put on your phone, and it is in your, where is that app, you guys, on the tip of my tongue? Summer, looking.
Summer Eats.
Summer Eats. It's free meals for kids. If you can see, there's this free meals for kids that'll show when and if there's a free meal program in your community. And there are lots of programs that are happening. Thank you very kindly, Jane. So you can check out and see if there's any meal serving sites in your community. And full disclosure that behind the scenes, while we're doing all of this, Kathleen, who is on the call today, is pulling together some of the information, like how many Summer Eat sites are in each community, how many restaurants are in each community, and putting together our community profiles, if you will. So she is putting that and pulling it together for each and every one of you, because it just felt like there was a lot of things that were waiting behind the scenes, and she wanted to know how she could help. And I'm like, this would be great if you could show us those sites. So we'll have Kathleen present that at some point when I don't want to put any speed racing on there, but know that that's happening behind the scenes. And then the other question is, Willowen had asked why there was a value. And so now you can explain that.
It just hadn't been updated, so I'm updating it right now from the other tab because we added some stuff. So there will be a value in here for you guys when you get it after lunch.
And this is what took us a little bit extra time in that break, just so that you guys know we wanted to make this a very user-friendly format and started adding a few lines like that funding source and identifying where that funding source mix comes from, so that if you have no market share boxes this year, then you have to figure out where the rest of your funding is going to come from to make this a profitable venture for your community.
So yeah, this year 2 and year 3 will get updated, and what it will be doing is it will just pull. For right now, you'll want to get this a little bit more, but it will pull from a % increase that you input up here. So you might say you're going to increase your sales by 25% evenly across funding strings. And that's what the default will be, but we can talk about this more. Or you might do that at first, but then you'll start to tweak it based on this funding mix and where you would like it to be in year 2, year 3. So I'll add a % funding source for each of these two. Yes. Okay. So I think you're kind of seeing on how these work. Once you start coming down to sponsorships and donations, right? You might be like, okay, who are those in my community that I might be able to get a sponsorship from? Is there like a healthcare facility, like a hospital who might invest? Is there like a seed company in my area that would want to support farmers and invest in my market? Is there a utility company? Does somebody on your board know like a law firm that you think is gonna want to show that they support the market and market vendors, right? You might get a feel for who those partners are, who might give you some sponsorship dollars. And then you can start to say, hey, I'm talking to this hospital now. I'm trying to ask them for $500. I'd love for them to give it to me in April so that they can have a banner out on the information tent for the whole season, or they can have an ad on the on our Market Hub website. They have a banner ad, or I don't know what you might be selling from that sponsorship standpoint, but those are kind of where you can start to think about what are those value added things you can offer community partners to give you money and give them exposure by being connected to your cause and mission. Similarly, you might think about donations. You might have friends of the farmers market, or you might have individuals who give you a donation or add a donation onto a purchase they make at the vendor site because they want to. Maybe there's like a $25. Do you want to pay for onboarding a new vendor to the platform so they get more sales? Donate $50. Maybe you get some individual donations, and then you can use them however you want. Or you have some corporate donations, right? Maybe there's a business that just gives you some money, but it's not for anything in return, like a sponsorship. They just want to fund the work you do because it adds such a value to the community. And that donation, and in the form of money, right? And then maybe similarly, you have some unique businesses in the area that are able to offer some in-kind support. Maybe somebody is able to, maybe there's a CPA who gives you some free accounting services, or there's a box company that gives you packaging, or there's a truck that leases you for it, or maybe there's just some other way you're getting some donations that offset some expenses up there as well. You can kind of track them here. And these would be offset by expenses, the actual expense on your balance sheet. Similarly, kind of grants and contracts, right? So you might write for some sort of grant to fund some work or education or programming, and maybe you wrote it and you hope you're gonna be awarded it in September. and you'll start being able to request reimbursement. So you might document where you expect to see that grant come in. Maybe you have that subawardee from Renewing the Countryside. So you have the subaward from them where you're seeing some income come through. And so maybe you're getting like the $300 from Renewing the Countryside a month as income, as a grant. You could show that coming in each month here and label it accordingly. And again, it'll all.
There's a question about in kind and if we should put volunteer in kind in here and what that would look like. And I'm not sure what to think about in kind in this form. I'm trying to get through my mind how in kind would impact the forecast. Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't think you won't want to put it up here in this revenue side for the moment, but I think what we want to do is make sure that we capture it in some way when we think about, depending on what they do, because it's something you would have to pay for if you did not have the volunteer labor. Let me look at back and get back to you with kind of the best way to think about that. But that is a great question. And I think you'll want to track how those volunteers are, the labor you are getting from volunteers, and then we can follow up with some different additional ways or like a mechanism to best recognize that in this infrastructure. Because the labor can be a little bit more tricky. So this can help you kind of think through and itemizing where you're getting those specific or your approach or strategies or tactics for getting these certain revenue sources to grow or to get those coming in. And then this % funding source, as Sarah was calling out, they want you guys paying a lot of attention to this mix and where it's landing. And it's important because you don't want to be that dependent on any specific funding source, because you want to have a diversified revenue stream so you can offset the others. And so as you start to put these in, you'll start to see, okay, how much % is program revenue? What is sponsorship? What is donation? And you can start to tweak towards an optimized target. And I think we'll drop in some numbers here based on what we're seeing working for other hubs. So you'll have this in the version you have when you come back from lunch, so that you can start to see if your first draft gets you, close to this target. You can just kind of see a benchmark. Doesn't mean that yours is wrong, right? Like, you know what's going on in your community, you know the conversations that you have been having. You just want to, it's very helpful, similar to that business model canvas we did yesterday, right? Putting some assumptions down on paper or Excel file or whichever source of software application you use to do this sort of work, so that you can kind of see what that big picture looks like. And we always have an assumptions tab in here. So if as you're doing stuff, it's helpful or you want to drop an assumption in here, you can. So like if you're saying, I'm assuming I get 5 sponsorships from, or 5 restaurant sales, or that restaurants are going to purchase, 5 ingredients 2 times a week. Like, sometimes dropping assumptions in here is helpful, or you can just add them as notes in the cell, right? I'm a big fan. I often put notes in a cell just so I know where my initial thought process was for that number. And then if I look at what actually happened, I can be like, oh, that's interesting. I guess this didn't happen the way I thought. What did I learn from that? Or what does that tell me about the next year or the next month, depending when I'm looking at it. So that kind of pulls in and gives you this income side. And then when it comes to the expense side, a good, I think, place to start is with this initial kind of worksheet and thinking through which of these things are relevant, what's missing, how much does it cost, when does it hit? And you can just kind of start with putting in the things that you know, right? Like your online platform, if it's $750 and it hits in March, you can come over to March to the online platform and put in $750 If you know you have one kind of a $300 insurance payment that hits in May, and maybe that insurance payment is for, I don't know, liability. And then maybe you have another one that hits in August and that is for something else. You can kind of add that note in and see what that's hitting, what that expense is looking like. I'm going to delete that note there too. And then you can also start to see, okay, if you're starting to pick up market box sales in April, that means you're probably marketing and promoting them in March. And what are you doing to do that? Did you buy an ad somewhere? Did you print off some flyers? Did you do anything that costed money to help you do that? So you want to make sure you're recognizing that there. Similarly for wholesale sales, if you're landing some wholesale sales in May, did you have to buy some samples from farmers to drop off? Did you have to print off some price sheets? Like, did you have to spend any money to help get that? Are you running ads for customers to get them to your market so they know about your hub? Just kind of thinking through what you're doing and making sure you kind of have that expense in here. Are you having to buy any supplies on a regular basis? Did you have to buy tablecloths? Receipt rolls for the credit card machine? You know, maybe there's just a bucket like $25 a month because you have to, and you're like, this is receipt roll or cash box or whatever it is. Or maybe you just do one pay, you know, you do it every 6 months or something, but kind of starting to think through what it takes to keep your market churning and what those expenses are in here. And then for the next 2 years, right now, it's just pulling from your previous year total and adding in this % increase. So if you're deciding you want your sales to increase, that % is kind of being pushed onto this to give you a baseline. But then you would do a look at it to say, because not everything might increase exponentially, labor might stay the same, you're just being more efficient, right? Certain things might not change, but it just gives you an initial place to start to update your next 2 years of plans. They did have in a version that the team had, they had put in kind of your managely or hourly rate and hours. And so if thinking about how this shakes out, you want to have a little worksheet up here. You can adjust an hourly rate and hours by month that will pull down there. If that is helpful, just to kind of see how it builds throughout the season. I mean, not 15 hours, you're going to be working more than that during heavy market season, but those are some of the inputs there. This is some of the initial cost of goods sold, just kind of how to think about them stuff sits. And the only reason I'm bringing this tab up right now is just to remember that it is important to think about that margin that you're taking or the markup you're putting on your products. Because when you're in here doing your sales forecast, right, you're using those prices that you're extending to your customer. And so that price that is contributing to your sale needs to account and have this margin or markup in there, because the only way your sales are ever going to offset these expenses, right, is if the margin, this gross profit that you have left over, can cover all of these expenses you have down here, right? And the way you get this gross profit number is by that margin, that markup you have on your products. And so you want to kind of track, you want to make sure that you have enough left here that this net income eventually, maybe not year one because you're building up some things, but that this net income starts to trend towards break even or ideally positive.
Okay, so slow down on that one more time, Sarah. So you started with the COGS, the cost of goods. Yep.
Yep.
And you walked through what those goods are. So having that margin and that markup is an important piece of this. So that was really quick on 3 different tabs. So I just want to go through that one more time, if you could.
Sure, yeah. So when you're pricing your items, so like a market share box, right? You'll have all those different components to get to the total cost of what it takes you to put that box together. But you'll also have a markup or your internal margin you want to get on that item that you're going to add, right? So it may cost you $16, but you're going to price it at 20 or 22 or 25 or whatever you decide to price it at, because you're going to give it some sort of margin markup to get a margin that you need to cover your additional costs, right? Your operating costs, your selling and general administrative costs, right? And so this price is the number that you're using to get your sales forecast to work. So if you're selling market share boxes and you're in your sales forecast tab, you're going to be selling your market share boxes at $20, and you're going to be thinking about how many people are going to buy it. So if it's $20 and I put 100 in April, that's saying I'm going to sell 5 market share boxes at $20. My cost of goods sold for each box is $16.12. So over here in my cost of goods sold, in theory, what I would see happen is that $16.12 per box that I sold in May would hit here. And then I would be getting my total COGS number is all those costs that went into those products. My total sales is everything that I sold. The difference between those is my gross profit. That difference is that margin or markup, right? That's what's giving me that difference. And then what's left, that is what needs to cover all of these remaining expenses in order for my net income to be positive, right? So the only way my business can be viable or profitable is if that I'm selling enough products with a high enough margin or markup that what I have left, my gross profit, can cover my expenses.
And to put this into a hub manager's terms. So when I first started doing market share boxes, Kathy Zeman and I squared it off a little bit because I was like, oh my gosh, we did so good. I set my boxes, my market share boxes, I put at $20 a week, and I was so excited. And I ordered $20 worth of produce from my farmers every week, and I was stoked. And Kathy's like, Sarah, you're doing terrible. What did you do? What did you just do to yourself? I'm like, I was so excited. I had 27 market share boxes to sell and into the community. And I was covering the cost of my time and of my bags and my boxes and my labels. And I didn't even consider that as something that I needed to think through. And so this is just that planting that seed to make you think through, like, when you're looking at that product, when you're looking at that market share box, an aggregated CSA box, you're not going to be the one putting the price on those organic carrots and the zucchini and blueberries. Your farmer is. And so some of these numbers, they are going to be projections and I struggle with projections, guilty as charged. I struggle, like, how many am I going to sell? I don't know how many I'm going to sell, but having an idea of what you're shooting to sell is really helpful. And honestly, the boxes, I think, surprised me. So we want to use wax boxes, which means that you're going to have a box that's going to be about $1.50 a pop. You're going to need 2 boxes minimum per market share customer. And I didn't think about that until I put all 27 orders, into each individual 27 boxes. And the next week I went to assemble them. I'm like, oh, the boxes are in their hands right now. You have to have another box to send back, right? So like we were putting plastic bags. Yes, Allison, we did reuse those wax boxes. And so we were putting plastic liners in those wax boxes so that we could use those. And I didn't think through, I need 27 more. And then you're going to have those boxes, those customers that forget them. So you're going to need a percentage of them that you're going to need more than the 2 boxes per market share order. And Kathy caught me on this and I was really angry, like, oh my gosh. And then I went, holy smokes, I'm totally losing money. Kathy's 100% right. My brain didn't think about those financial pieces. And projections is hard for me. And so for those of you that are feeling that, I'm there, I'm with you. And there's people that have those numbers in their head, and there's people that don't have that ability. But the sustainability this would be your sustainability plan for us. We do need to do this for each community. We do have this written in that each of you will put something like this together. And so we're hoping to make it as easy as possible so that you can think through ways that you can create a hub that will last longer than the life of the grant that we're working through.
And there's a lot of, just a shout out that there are lots of tools and systems and knowledge to help you with this. And Kathy gave a shout out to chart of accounts and things that can help you automatically capture cost of goods sold. And so I think as you're setting up your systems and you're starting to work through this, it's a good exercise to kind of think about this on paper and kind of see how this flows together. And then as you talk with, have a follow-on call with me or with the team, you can start to figure out like how this flows for you into that sustainability plan. For right now, the cost of goods sold, just until you guys start to figure out what some of your pricing is, I have it just tying to a number, to a percentage. So we know that 65%, 50 to 65% is a target, but often your cost of goods sold is higher when you're just starting out. So I put it in as 70% of sales for right now. And then I had it at 65% in year 2, year 3. But this can be a good initial way to get something in there for cost of goods sold. And then as you start to price out your offerings or know what you're selling and start to actually know what they cost, you can go back and kind of tighten this up a little bit. But that's just a way to at least get to account for it and have something in there. Yeah, and I think, Amanda, where you're going, I think what's going to be really valuable from you all is that if you haven't done this before, you can absolutely tap into, hey, you did market boxes. How many did you do? How much time did it take you to do this? What did you see during the season? And so I think that's what we're really hoping as the work time happens this afternoon. You can start to do this for your hub. And maybe we even put 2 hubs together for this, like an older and a newer, and Sarah and Jane and Kathy, we can talk about that so that you get some of that knowledge and can start to get some of these, start to put some things into this spreadsheet, and then we can come back together and share out on it. But again, just a reminder that this is similar to the documentation we talk about, right? These are iterative living documents. They help you kind of manage your business. They help you get some assumptions on paper so that you can see what you're thinking right now, and you can start to assess the reality or how things are changing. And so they're really valuable organizational and planning tools. So try to shake off any anxiety if you don't know the answers. It's okay. We're just trying to make our best guess or get a proxy or pull information from others into it. So I'm going to stop there with showing. I'm going to make a couple final tweaks to the spreadsheet so that I have a formula to update, I think, on the other tab. We'll get it back up for you guys by the time you're back from lunch, and then we'll be breaking into groups a little bit to do some active work while this is fresh in our brains.
Deep breath. You guys are doing great. And we'll work with you. We're excited about this. Even me, who's not a numbers person, this is exciting.
I just have to say, I'm just really concerned because we are so far north about the growing season and stuff and our very small amount of producers. So projecting is difficult. And so I just wanted to say that it was because we are dealing with living things and weather and everything, that's kind of makes me nervous anyway. But I know we need to break.
Kathy, do you want to throw in your projections? Because that was one of the things that I talked about. I'm like, ick, projections feels like, it doesn't even feel like I'm throwing spaghetti at a wall. It feels like I'm throwing Jello. And projections make me very uncomfortable, but actually, Kathy, are you there?
Sarah, I am. I'm sorry. What do you want me to say?
If you wanted to talk through, you know, in the breakout, when we went in the breakout room and talked about this spreadsheet, I said, oof, projections make me feel uncomfortable. And your comeback was spot on.
Yeah, so I really did yell at Sarah that year. Because I'm like, Sarah, you could have made more money sitting on your couch doing nothing. But that's really important, right? The first time I sent a cash flow to my banker, he laughed at me and he said, for you farmers, this is just a wish list. This has nothing to do with reality. And I'm like, dude, I worked a long time on that. But the point is, again, it is a projection. At the end of the, those numbers could change 5,000 times and 100%. And at the end of the year, at the end of year one, for you new markets, it could all be red. You could all be negative. That's fine. You're just learning. So you're not only learning a new system, you're learning a new financial report. Hopefully by year 3, you've got that figured out. But again, it's okay. I mean, but I like numbers, even though my banker yelled at me when he.
Well, and it's like,
me, right?
it's like exercising a muscle, right? Like we're not going to we can't lift the 100 pounds right away, but the more we lift, the 25 pounds and then the 50 and we get to the 100 pounds, right? And I think a lot of it is also that process. Like that banker is going to be impressed to see that you have documentation and you have a thought process and you can say where the numbers come from. And you can explain why they didn't happen if they didn't, right? Because we know things don't always happen the way we know things change, but having a thought process and having a rationale or having those assumptions is what's really important. And it goes back to being able to tell that story of the business model that you're trying to make happen. But stories change, they evolve, they get new chapters, that's all okay. And it's just really setting us up for that success of going through that process, that exercise. And it is hard, but you can at least get some things on paper, which will actually remove some of that anxiety, Christine. We've had a lot of conversations with folks in the last 2 years that are just like, I have no idea if anyone's going to buy for me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep my restaurant open. I don't know how to do these projections. And it's sort of like, well, we have to get something on paper. We have to just see what the reality could be so that we can help you make those decisions, right? So yeah, shake it off, do what you need to do to clear your brains, get some good food. Yeah.
2 things to think about on this one. I want to say that one, Kathy actually stressed to me, Sarah, you'd be making more money sitting on your couch reading a book to your daughter. I went, oh gosh, I'm working so hard for this. And she's totally right. I'm losing money because I'm not putting that markup in there. And so it's important for us to see that. And I lost my second one already. Oh, no, I didn't. So what we put into this project is our goal for anybody that's a new market, for you to plan to seed here, is that our goal is our new markets are able to have $2,000 run through the online sales platform in year 1. Ideally, you guys rock our world. You have well over that $2,000. But if you're concerned about your number, like let's start with that $2,000 and set where you want that to be. Do you want it to be wholesale sales? Do you want that to be retail sales? Do you want that to be market share boxes? And then work backwards so that you can have that, like set your goals and find out where you're at with that. So think through that during your lunch break, like what you want that to look like.
And like in that spreadsheet, will that 2,000 most likely come in like maybe August, September? Because it's your first year. You're going to not get those sales until late in the year, maybe October, November.
And ideally it's way over that, but we'll see. We'll figure it out, Okay.
All right. So let's take, right Rapids, Red Wing, Moorhead. Beverly is Wilmar. I'm trying to see how good my memory is. Okay, Wabasha. I don't have to remember some of these because they're named well.
Chester?
Allison, I can't remember. My other notes are in the office.
Starts with an A.
Atkins, Aiken.
Aiken. Yeah.
Aiken. Okay, that should be easy. Allison Aiken. Okay,
No.
I've got it now. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we have. Okay, and I'm missing one. I am missing. Amanda, which one are you?
Rochester.
Rochester. Okay.
So I think from this morning's count, it looks to me like we're missing Jody, who may be off because of so Jody's just our Renewing the Countryside accountant, grant specialist kind of deal. So were we at 16 this morning? Is that right?
I did write down everybody who was here. So I could count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm here. I just got back from
Yeah, 16.
potatoes, so I'm gonna snarf food really quick, and then I also have a truck that's coming anytime now, so I gotta maybe leave once that gets here to load a few pallets. So
Don't even scarf. Enjoy and savor to the degree that you can.
I usually snarf anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
And then Verna would be another one that was on for a little bit this morning, but we've got 2 of us here from Moorhead, so.
You'll be, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Bjorn. Okay, awesome. Well, I hope everybody had some good moving around time, lunch, reset, recalibrating yourself for the day. Yeah, this afternoon is really just similar to yesterday afternoon. We want to provide some like processing time, some work time, some kind of opportunity to kind of discuss what's happening in your market with another person from your market if they happen to be here, or with someone else in the room. So I think what makes sense, Sarah, is if we want to kind of look at which markets are here and maybe put some folks that only have one in the room with someone else or with another individual, if we want to kind of think through the breakout rooms and what makes the most sense. I know Moorhead has 2, so you guys can work together. Wabasha.
So it makes me wonder, as we were doing this, I started wondering, Jane, if we should do, typically like Aiken and Grand Rapids are together, but do we look at it and have our markets do the team up approach where it's an existing market with a new market so that they can kind of mentor each other? But that would be awkward because it's like Wabasha and Red Wing and Rochester have uniquely always done together, and Aiken and Grand Rapids have always been together. But those are some of those existing hubs, and so breaking us up.
Whatever you think, Sarah. I just powered through getting all the spreadsheets up, and I'm out of brain power for a little bit, so I'm not going to make that decision. You go for it.
So Allison and Willow, Allison, you've been with us. You understand.
Yeah, I'd be okay going with a new market. If that kind of makes sense. And somebody did ask in the chat, like, you know, can some of the existing markets help us understand how this works? And yeah, that's fine with me.
Perfect. Are you ready to open up those rooms, or do you want to wait, Sarah?
No, I think we can open up the rooms, and I think folks just like use it as an opportunity to learn. I think pairing and existing with a neuro hub makes a lot of sense. I think it doesn't even have to be one-to-one, like depending on what, Sarah, as you're looking at who's in the room, if there's like 3 in a room, or just kind of, I think the important thing is you want to kind of get through some of that anxiety, kind of just start moving around the spreadsheet a little bit, dropping some numbers in, kind of talk through some of what's happening, hear how the other hubs are talking through what's happening in theirs, and kind of pull in what makes sense or what you could see happening in your hub. So just as they were saying, like exercising this muscle a little bit, starting to see where things are falling, moving within those spreadsheets a little bit. And if there's things you don't know, just keep a list of questions. And when we come back together in the afternoon, we can tap into the bigger group, right? We can share some things that, were like aha moments, or some things you might have a question on for the group of like, I didn't know if this was relevant, or does anyone have to deal with this, right? And if there's time, we'll address them today, or we'll make a note to follow up with additional resources.
So we're supposed to download the spreadsheets that Jane just put up and work on those? Is that what I'm hearing?
So they're live
No,
Google Docs. Don't download it. Don't download it.
Oh, okay, just open it. And you
Yeah.
can
Yep.
allow screen sharing for all of us, right?
Yes, good call. So security, screen share, you guys should all have screen share ability now. Thank you. If Jane, in the future, if you ever need to do that, you click on security and allow participants to screen share. Okay. You had something to say.
Okay,
Jane.
should we maybe have everybody go to their spreadsheet and just make sure they can get in, because I did this lightning fast. I think I got all the settings right. But
yes.
So this is the page now, farmersmarkethub.org spreadsheets, and then each hub is listed alphabetically. And you've got your project tracking spreadsheet that you've had access to before, and now the brand new financial forecasting spreadsheet that Sarah Larson just edited over lunch. So just click on your financial forecasting one, make sure you're getting into it.
Okay, Laura's, Amanda got in and Willow got in, but Laura is saying it sent an access request. Allison's is good, Willow is good. And Laura, it could be that you're signed in as your, instead of being signed in as the Wabasha account, you could be signed in as your Laura Yankee
Yeah,
account.
I gave you access as Laura Mackey, your Gmail address. So if there's a different address I should put in there, I can do that quick. What is it? Wabasha?
At wabashafm@gmail.com. Like farmers market, Wabasha farmers market, Wabasha FM.
Mine keeps saying they were going to send you an email for verification, and I got the email, but it doesn't allow me into anything that I can see. I don't know.
And Marlise, is that Marlise? I used your Outlook.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm using here. So I don't.
yeah, it's worked before.
Sent you an email for verification.
Marlise, would it help if you shared screens? We could see what it's telling you.
That's what I was just thinking.
Who shared what? I'm sorry.
Can you share your screen so we can see what you're seeing?
Yeah, hang on a second. Let me get back to my email.
We're going to be so tech savvy by the end of this 2 days.
Laura, you're in. We just lost Marlise. Your sound.
Yeah,
There we go.
Coming back. I'm trying. Share screen. Okay, what I want to share is my email.
Okay.
And I do this, but I don't get anywhere. And I do this, but I don't get anywhere. What do I need to do?
Protected by Outlook. Huh.
Okay, so go to the not to the Wabasha, blah, 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 blah. Go to the www.farmersmarkethub.org. Just go direct.
That's where I was. And when I tried to click on it to open it, it said, we have to send you an email first to verify this is the email. So
Marlies, can you click on that learn more? Oh,
learn more, sure.
I don't know what that'll do.
I don't know. I can look on to Christine's screen. It's okay.
Okay. All right.
Let's just do that.
Beverly, did you get into yours?
I did.
Good job.
It won't let you
Okay,
into
Mine
project.
did
So-
pop up through mine is showing on the email, and I'm able to see it. But I'm afraid to make it bigger because sometimes Zoom and my
Yeah.
computer and other things open kind of do weird things. But it looks like I'll be able to put numbers in.
Well, and I think we'll have someone in the main room at all times. So if you have any trouble with something, just pop back into the main room and
I'm assuming Jane just saw the message, Laura, and is taking care of that. I hate making
The project
assumptions.
tracking one.
Yeah,
Yeah, fixing that.
bless your heart. So what I'm gonna do, you guys, is open these rooms. Now, don't run into them quite yet, because I'd like to talk through, and I didn't name these. It just says 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because now I want to see, like, do you have a preference on who's teamed up with who, or do you, you know, who wants to work with what? I want to have you guys choose this, like help guide us as we're doing this. And because we have enough project team members that can kind of bounce in and help too. So Moorhead, maybe we start Moorhead in room 1. The heck was that? Do you have anybody that you'd like to work with in Candace? That's existing, so Aiken, Grand Rapids, Red Wing, or I guess Wabasha.
Yeah, Wabasha. Let's do Wabasha.
Okay, so Laura, if you can go into room 1, and Moorhead, go into room 1. I
we'll
can,
check in around 2:15 about pulling folks back. So
and so for room 2, can we get, we're losing people left and right. Okay, so let's do our Amanda. I'm gonna have you with Rochester. Do you have a preference on who you go in with? Aiken, Grand Rapids, or Red Wing?
I don't know.
And Kathy, do you want to go in room 1 with Moorhead and Wabasha?
Sure.
I'd kind of like to hear Allison and Amanda team up just to see how you two go, if that's, and unless Allison, you have some. I'd love to see you two in room 2.
I have no preconceived notions.
Awesome. Well, why don't you two join up in room 2?
Okay.
Okay. Christine, you are in Virginia. So room 3 for Christine. And I would like to see, you know, I wonder if I don't go in, because you've worked with Grand Rapids before. So room 3 would be the 2 of us. And anybody from Virginia.
Me?
Ed Marley. Yes. Oh, your microphone is doing something really weird.
How long do you want us in the breakout rooms?
How long in the breakout rooms, I think, is what she's saying. It sounds like she's been sniffing helium.
Using a Darth Vader filter, maybe.
Oh my gosh.
I think Laura or Sarah said that 2:15 she
Yes.
wanted us back. So,
okay.
And just let me know where you would like me to sit in. I have some limited community profiles and can just kind of chime in or observe and see what you guys are doing. But I have access to all the spreadsheets so I can help muddle through.
Marlies, room 3, perfect. Okay, so room 4, let's work on Grand Rapids and, you guys, let's go Wilmer. Looks like Grand Rapids and Wilmer. Okay. And so if Kathy goes in room 1, Jane, do you want to shake it up and go in room 2? If I'm going in room 3, then room 4 would be Kathleen. And that would be Wilmer, assign room 4 and Grand Rapids. Kathleen, room 4. Kent, room 4. Willow in room 4. There, I think everybody's assigned. Cool. So Christine, can you get in there? Here we go. All right, I'm gonna go join. I don't remember where I was going. Room 3, I'm going in there. Beverly, do you know where you're headed? Yes.
Room 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Sayonara. Oh, good. Pause record.
See some smiles, some waves, some snacking, which I'm a fan of at this hour of the day. Oh, well, awesome. I hope those were some really good conversations and some good insights in helping you guys kind of think about the finances of the hub and kind of what that will all look like for the next year and perhaps even future years. I think what we were kind of hoping to do as we came back was just to do a little bit of sharing out to kind of hear how that work time went. If you have any kind of aha moments or insights to share that you might think will help other hubs in the room, or if you had any kind of question marks or things you wanted to just ask to see if folks had other ideas for. Anything else to add? Sarah George, other Sarah. My Sarah counterpart.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll do the standard. Is anyone feeling like sharing first? Otherwise, I can call on someone and we can sort of do a popcorn.
Everybody's being shy.
I can share first.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda.
What do you want to know?
I think if kind of what were maybe some kind of takeaways or insights from that work session or from today as you were looking at thinking about your hub and the finance kind of planning for your hub, revenue, kind of those sorts of things. And then if there are any sticky points, like maybe as you were talking and thinking about what it might look like for your hub this year or the next couple of years, if there was like I was kind of stuck on this, I just want to share and see if other people had a solution or had talked through this.
Okay. Yeah, so I met with Jane and Allison and just really picked their brain on what they have done, how they got started, how it's progressed, what's been successful for them. And then we went through a little bit of the spreadsheet and how to populate it. And yeah, I mean, it seems to be manageable. It's a lot, and there are so many unknowns, but I feel like I have a decent idea of a direction to go moving forward as far as how to set up some CSA boxes and get them on the retail side and figure it out, hopefully.
Great.
That's the plan.
Great. Yeah. So that's wonderful. So that sounds like being able to talk to some existing hubs, get some insights. So you're feeling a little less anxious, even though we know we can't remove it all because there will be those unknowns until we kind of get moving. So glad that conversation happened and you had those folks in the room. And that even just, I think the more you see the spreadsheets and the more you hear people talk about it and all of that, it sounds like it's getting a little bit less intimidating, even though it might still be a little bit. So that's great. Thank you, Amanda.
I met with Virginia and I could share some of the ahas that we saw.
Please.
If that's okay. And I think actually sharing the screen maybe will be helpful. So we started with the forecast and zeroing things out. It felt really overwhelming seeing some of those bigger numbers in there. So we really wanted to see, like, our goal was to get to that $2,000 to start with. Because that was a concern since they're newer and only had a couple sales last year. And so the first panic, the initial panic was like $2,000, but how can we make that happen? And so we started by just identifying, who the wholesale customers would be and thinking through, okay, the supply is limited. So maybe let's only do August, September, and October. And we started with just a couple $100 a month, which is only $50 a week for each of these institutions. That felt like a lot. And so we decided maybe we would bump forward and add 100 earlier in the season in July and thinking through what products would be there. And that helped us realize, well, gosh, we're going to have more product in August. So let's shoot for an additional $100 in August. And I walked them through because that got us to our $2,000. However, I walked them through how instead of doing a market share box for the whole season, maybe just working with the school and having the schools encourage those school sales. That's how I started market share boxes in Wabasha, was for employees at the school where I was already making deliveries, bought market share boxes for 1 month. I didn't want to sell it for longer than that because there's not a lot of product and there's nobody in school until September. And so 4 people at the school ordering 1 box for 4 weeks was still $400. And that made a big difference. And they were starting to think about like the 4 boxes and the impact that that makes. So we're leaving that there. They're not sure if they're going to do market share boxes, but this helps them realize this is goal setting. And that made us go backwards then to this. No, sorry, I lost my tabs. To this tab where we were thinking through, and we wanted to update the hourly rate and the manager hours, and make sure you guys, as you're looking at your forms, 520 hours is what the LFPP covers. And so we fixed this so that it had the 25 times the 520. And that took us a little bit thinking through how many hours and what would be done during those hours, and then what those expenses would be. So we opened up on the LFPP, that allowed expenses form. And we're looking through like, what are the expenses that are covered, and actually brought those into the spreadsheet and broke them up by month. So those are in here as goals. You're going to see that there's still things that aren't covered. And I don't think I captured all of the expenses because all of those sales, I didn't purchase the food for those sales yet. So I'm working on that and trying to figure out where that's at. But yes, But
Well,
we
you do
started
have a
here.
cost of goods sold allocation in there. So you do have a metric in there that is counting for like the ingredients. So like if you see that 70% on top, Sarah,
Oh, yep.
that 70% of sales is going into line 21.
Okay.
So that
Got
right
it.
now is your placeholder for all of that stuff, just because it gets pretty like detailed when you're just starting to figure out what your cost structure is and like what who your vendors are and everything. So for right now, that's the spreadsheet is set up in that way, just to kind of take a little bit of that. You can think about it on the pricing side, right? When you're pricing stuff.
Thank you.
And then tweak this. Yeah.
Okay, so that helped a lot. And then we just dropped in, you know, where those LFPP would be covering those expenses so that it would be able to bring over. But it was really helpful to just walk through those pieces of it and think through if we were to, who would be your wholesale customers? I mean, that was a big step for us in this part. And who, if we get wholesale going, maybe we could get a little bit of retail going. And just starting to set those goals for, you know, that $2,000 this month. And if we could set those goals, how can we achieve those goals? Okay, that means we're going to have to do meetings up front. Let's see if I can find them right here. Those are buyer meetings where she's going to be going out and meeting with the buyer. So that's our mileage that we started associating in here, which is a part of our expenses. So we wanted to just wrap it all into one. So just sharing that. That's where we went.
I love that. That's perfect. Like that is a great example of how to think about this and to utilize those other kind of tools and resources you have to pull information in. So yeah, thanks for sharing the screen and sharing that, Sarah. Oh, I thought I saw a hand up, but my mouse is just a weird hand. Okay. Is there someone who would like to go next? Beverly, how did this go for you, or how was it being in the breakout room?
It was from, I'm not catching on to anything to something very, very interesting and informative. I think it's because I don't have a prior year to even start from. You know, I don't have any numbers to look back to in my hand.
Sure.
So, yeah.
What is a good hub? Who did we have Beverly with before? What would be a good hub for her to talk to help work through some of that?
Amanda? In with Kent and
okay.
Right.
Grand Rapids. So Willa Lynn was filling in her numbers, and we just got to talking about the structure of Beverly's businesses and how they would fit with Open Food Network in particular. And we've really got that clarified, I think, and have a way to proceed with that for sure. The numbers, you know, obviously aren't there yet, but there is a way to get it set up and get it separated and things. And that was one thing we talked about a little bit, was the separation of the hubs from the markets, actual markets themselves. So this was a step beyond that, but I think a lot of people are probably looking at that like we had to take certain percentages of the numbers that Willa Lynn was filling in because they were for the market as a whole, online plus market sales. So just estimating that was interesting. So I don't know if Willa Lynn or Kent wants to speak to that, but it was really informative.
Well, Kent helped a lot because he's our treasurer and he had all the numbers on hand. So it was really, it was easier to fill out all that numbers in the cells because we have I think you said 5 years already in doing the hub, right? So you have a history of profit and sales to go by. We can't hear you.
Yeah, we're not getting any audio from you.
Oh, wait, there it comes.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because the hub is part of the market as far as the financial situation, there is overlap on the insurance and the management and the staffing and things like that. So that's where we had to just make a guesstimate that, you know, so much of this insurance, yes, this part of the insurance is definitely the hub, but like workers' comp, that covers all of the employees. So there's one out of the 4 or 5 employees that is under the hub. So that was something to take into account there.
Yeah, it's great that you have all that data and that you can do some of those assumptions. And we see that all the time, particularly when there's a shared space, right? Like you allocate X% of the space to making the product and X% to the office, right? Like, or utilities percentages of staff, very common. And that's great that you guys have that data and knowledge to go through and kind of see what the impact is for the hub. And hopefully, Beverly, like watching them go through that Grand Rapids, once now we move on from this, you'll be able to, work closely to get Wilmar into that kind of same, And I know, I think from what I've heard, you kind of have some accounting support too, to help you on your side, which is fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
30 years of it worth every dollar.
Ooh, yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I was looking to see if there's anyone else, but I think we can check off Grand Rapids there. Moorhead, how did this go for you guys? How are you feeling? Good aha moments or takeaways? Questions for the group?
It felt good to just go through the spreadsheets and like find my way through it, click through all the tabs, figure out where everything was populating, and Kathy helped us figure out how to freeze so we could keep the dates up on the top and then scroll. Like, I know the way to do this, how? So just getting familiar with it and then plugging in some numbers and just seeing everything kind of adjust. Bjorn went in and made more adjustments on those numbers and got more realistic with it. I was just kind of plopping in things just to see how things were moving. So, and then, we're able to take some sales numbers from last year, from the online sales to direct to customer sales and plop those into, and that was neat to see. So,
how it impacted. Yeah, great.
This is Kathy. I could chime in. I was so jealous to listen to Candace and Bjorn talk back and forth. They got to work together as a team and throw stuff together. So the fact that, we've got this big team here together, I think will help all of us, but that was pretty fun to listen to.
It is one of the things I've been most grateful about with this whole process, and just kind of thinking back of where it all started and how lost we all felt in it and still do. And but just having that support throughout all of it and talking through all this stuff we get confused about, and just and none of us can do this alone, right? So there's like these layers of support, and this group being one of them, right? With all the experience that is in the room, in the Zoom room, like it's really, I'm just grateful to be here. So thank you.
I love it. Yeah. And I think it's like we're all finding, right? The more you share, the more you're like, oh, that's relevant to me, or I didn't think about that, or I'm going to think about that in 6 months. And so it's always that encouraging of like, if the question hasn't been asked, somebody wants to ask it, or somebody will ask it. So like, get it out there. We can all learn.
Did you have thoughts you wanted to add, Bjorn, in playing around with the spreadsheets?
Oh, I am unmuted. Ditto. Nice to have all the resources. Just need some time to dive into them.
Mhm. We got time. We can revisit all of this stuff. Yeah, and you'll have continued support through it all. Christine.
I was just really thankful that Sarah was there to walk us through because when you were doing the big screen with all the lines and numbers, it was really overwhelming because we are a little teeny market in northeastern Minnesota, and yeah, so it was just intimidating. So to have Sarah go through, because she knew how to do the thing and then go step by step, really helped. So thank you.
Great. So you're feeling a little better about it than
Yeah, I'm feeling
an hour
a
ago.
little bit
Good.
better, and I can look at it. I can look at it kind of as a guide, you know. But yeah, when it was all together in the bigger spreadsheet, yeah, it was just like, oh, scary. So
And
thank
that's,
you.
it is super. I think we know when we're like at FFI, when we have to deliver this like financial or any of these days, right? It can be a lot. And it was also really why we like this consulting or open work time in the afternoon for exactly that reason, Christine, right? Because it's not all relevant, your size and scale. And so I think it's even more lucky that we've had like Sarah and Kathy and Jane to kind of talk you through. So I'm glad to hear that you're coming out of this feeling a little bit more like, all right, spreadsheets, I can do this. I've got support. This is meaningful to me. This will help.
I was able to focus more and didn't feel like I was a dog going squirrel. You know, it's like, so that really helped. So thank you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Laura? You want to hop on and kind of share?
I was in the room with Bjorn and Moorhead, and I was mostly listening to them work it through together. I basically realized how much I didn't know and how much I really need to go through the books and kind of understand what Sarah's done with the market. So I know we'll get there, especially with her assistance. I'm feeling really good that we'll just be profitable. And I realized that like, this might not be my forte, but we'll definitely find someone who it will be theirs. And I'm probably, you know, better at running errands or, you know, kind of doing more of the physical stuff. But I also realized we have a vendor meeting in a couple of days that I need to get ready for. So I was kind of doing some advertising for that and starting to think about more of the practical, like we're not gonna have a market if we don't have vendors. So, you know, projecting numbers is great. And, you know, I appreciate the skill set, but it's kind of just a little too abstract right now. So we will work on it and I'm sure we'll get something that, you know, works well, just not currently, so.
Mm-hmm. And I like how you phrase some of that too, where it's sort of like, because some of it really is also just getting like, you said, this understanding, right? That this is how some of this works. This is how it impacts the market. And then as there becomes more data, as you get that additional support, right? It gets dug into more, but yeah, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be you, right? Like that's another key takeaway as well. Like you can find support from your community. We're always telling folks that, like, you know, don't put person A in the sales room, get somebody else to do it, right? Like they're better on the production floor, or put, you know, person behind the books or whatever. It's really, that's a really good awareness and exercise. That's just as important too. But having that working understanding, right? Like you're dangerous enough to like look at it and ask questions, which is part of our key takeaways we're hoping everybody's getting after we do a training like this. Awesome. Allison? Are you with us?
I'm here. So I do have some sales records. Um, from last year, and I am selling to the school this year. So those wholesale numbers for, let's see, sales forecast for ISD 1 right here are real numbers for January, February, and March, and some pretty good guesses for April and May. And also like some good guesses for the end of the start of the new school year in September. So I really hope to expand to a couple of small retailers. This says restaurant, but because it was supposed to be a small grocery. And I already have a restaurant customer that buys from my market booth every week during the season. So I'm trying to get them to change to the hub. And I already know about what they buy or what they bought last year. So I put that in for restaurant. We'll see how that goes. Market boxes. I'm really hoping to expand what I'm going to be selling into so last year, because of the really cool season, I didn't start market boxes until the end of August. But it was pretty lucrative. I was able to get a lot out there, so I'm hoping to start market boxes maybe in June, but really have a lot more July, August, September, and October. Aiken decided not to do any online retail sales other than the market boxes. We just don't have the staff support to do that, and I'm not available on market day because I have my own vendor booth, and I can't like do that aggregating on market day because I'm really trying to build my brand too. So I put in for grants and contracts, I just equalize the time so far for what the total's available for manager time and put in some expenses that I already know. That's as far as I got. I did do, what did I do? I sort of played around on here, estimating my hours, hoping to pay a little bit of money to another market employee, maybe a manager and or the treasurer. That's kind of a high estimate to pay the treasurer, but I just wanted to get something in there. But as far as like talking through my numbers, that's kind of what I got. So for what's the important one to look at?
On this one?
So this is total expenses. We want to go to.
If you go down a little bit more, you should see a net income.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
So
you're pretty close. Look at that.
You know, yeah. What do I want? What do I want to see here?
So that right there is showing that you lost $700 that year in your 2022 season. So ideally, you'd like to see that be a positive number, you know, like 50, 152, whatever, something positive to show that you made money to reinvest or to start you off right. Or you could even target like 0, like for year 1. I mean, that's really good for whatever year. A 0 there would mean that you made enough money to cover all your expenses in that year. And if that were positive, it would mean that you generated some additional profit that you can invest back into the market, into the hub.
What about year 2 and 3, where the numbers get a lot worse?
Yeah, so year 2 and 3, the same protocol, but right now all that it's doing is bringing in a 25% increase over. And so my guess is that some of that can be tweaked and it won't be as bad, or because some of the expenses won't go up exponentially, right? You can do probably increase sales to some extent without increasing your expenses, right? Because you have some of those systems in place. So that's some of the exercise you would do if you looked, you'd say, okay, am I paying a market manager more? In which case, maybe that does have to go up to $12.50. You can just kind of see where that all goes. And then if you go up to the revenue, the same thing there, right? You'll just want to make sure, does that feel good? You'll also learn more about what your cost of goods sold actually are, and maybe that number is lower than what is there, which would help you bring in more income. So right now it's just using a 65% allocation in year 2 and year 3, but that number could be lower as you learn more. And so that could help. You could also start bringing in sponsorships of some of those other like donations or some of those other community kind of partnerships that bring you some funds that might help make up some of that. So those would be the sort of questions, like if I was looking in there, I'd be looking at, or maybe it's that you can increase some of those sales a little bit more to cover. Maybe the school's starting to buy more. So in year 2, some of those numbers go up a little bit more than that.
Allison, what percent up markup are you doing now?
Well, last year I was trying to incentivize schools buying. So I did 12% for the school. And I tried to do 15% for restaurants and other type of customers. The majority of my profit came from market boxes.
Huh.
So I want to review with the farmers market board what we should be considering for our markup. Because the school is already paying more for local food. I didn't want them to be paying so much more that they wouldn't buy. You know, like if I did a 20% markup for the school, that's just a lot.
But you do, it just does sound like you've got a little bit of room there you can play with on your markup, right?
Yeah, I probably do have some room, and I want to look at it. I want to look at it more.
That's good.
Yeah, I think these are great, like kind of seeing how, and hopefully it's helping some of you, like as you're seeing how folks have input the numbers in here and how they're thinking. I think this really illustrates kind of that story with the numbers that you guys were telling on your business model canvas yesterday. And it helps you also see, like if you're talking to your board and you're trying to figure out those decisions, you can start to see, oh, I'm not quite making money yet based on what I'm planning, you know, or breaking even, or depending what your objective is, right? Like maybe it's not to make like $500, it's just to like break even, or to need to add in $1,000 of sponsorships so you break even, but you're trying to get to that point. And so these sort of tools can help you with those conversations with your board or as you're planning as well, to know what gaps you're hoping to cover. Thanks for sharing that, Allison. Marlies, I think we have come to you.
And I was in the group with Christine and Sarah.
Okay.
And Sarah did a bang up job.
Oh, of showing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It was very, very helpful.
Excellent. Have I missed anyone?
Sarah, I'll just hop in quickly and say
Please.
that one of the things that we had a little trouble with right away with the spreadsheet was which fields you enter into and where the embedded formulas are. And we straightened it out, but if anybody thinks they might have accidentally deleted an embedded formula by entering data in the wrong line, I can fix that for you in the spreadsheet. Just let me know. We do have the original that all of yours are copies of, and so we can restore things if you think you might have done that.
Jane, is there a way to lock the cell? So, you know, if we're not supposed to put a number in that cell, you know, it won't screw up the whole spreadsheet. No.
There probably is. I don't know how to do it. If anybody knows.
I tried
I-
previously.
I do. I do. I've locked a number of cells. The problem is that you have to remember the password. And so that didn't work as well.
Yeah. Maybe
I will
don't do
say
that then.
right now, the yellow cells, if you kind of think yellow cells enter things into, that should at least help for the moment. And then, as Jane said, there is the original. We can go back and kind of reset it. And we also can, as we get closer to like a year plan, if we have a call where we're reviewing it, we can double check that everything's working right, like as we're reviewing. And so no, there'll be like a check and balance. If you're worried you might have done something and it's doing something weird, we can also do a review and just kind of look at it together as well. But yes, that
Yeah,
is
and the
part
other-
of the fun with these spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, having those embedded formulas is fabulous. It's just if you accidentally delete one, then you're hurting. The other thing I wanted to make sure people remember is that, you know, with the spreadsheets, it's easy to put all your emphasis on what you're selling and the sales income and the markup on that. And just don't forget about those sponsorships and donations, because our prior several years experience with hubs has shown that for most of them, possibly Rochester being an exception because it's a fairly major urban area, but for most of the hubs, you're going to have to look at getting some sponsorships and donations to float the hub over the long term. So just don't forget to be thinking about that as part of your funding mix and including some projections for how you pull those in as well.
Who does Grand Rapids go to for donations and things like that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, well, currently, all of our donations are coming into the market itself, not the hub specifically. So we're getting donations to run the POP program, Power of Produce, and the matching dollars for EBT and Market Bucks. So we don't currently have sponsorships that are specifically for the hubs, but we have been getting some grants. Besides this LFPP grant, we have gotten Compeer grants 2 years in a row now for running the winter market through the hub. So yeah, we're still kind of at the ground floor on looking for those kinds of support for Grand Rapids too.
And that could maybe even be a conversation with the market, right? You guys are partners and collaborators and hopefully driving traffic, right, to farmers and for local food purchases. And maybe there's some, if you're both actively going after sponsors, the hub gets 10% of certain, you know, maybe there's like a split if a sponsor is supporting the hub and the market. So there might, similar to how Kent was talking about the labor being like kind of split across, right? Maybe there's some relationships or partnerships that end up impacting both in that way. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
that's a
really
good point, Sarah. We actually do, yeah, now that you say that, we do have some of that feeding the hub a little bit, like the Market Bucks administrative grant, because we are seeing some EBT customers using the hub to purchase product. And so from our administrative grant for Market Bucks, we are carving off a little percentage of that to go towards the hub manager. So yeah, those kinds of percentage things, for sure.
excellent. Whew. Well, you guys have done an awesome job today. It's really great hearing what everyone is thinking and seeing kind of how some of this planning is coming together for 2022 and beyond. Lots of great breadth and depth of knowledge from your technical assistance providers and support and from all of you. And so I know that you'll be able to kind of make this all work and have the support to do so. So anxiety will get quelled and calmed, and all of this will come together, and it'll be really great to see as your seasons start, right? Kind of what happens and kind of what matches what you're thinking, and kind of what it's kind of like a psychological social experiment, right? When you start to see all these things take place. And so we're kind of working towards all of that. For kind of next steps, I know that you guys will all continue to work together. I'm also available if you get to a point at which you've got your year forecast together, or you're working through your COGS and you want to sit down and kind of chat it out for an hour. You want to build out your year 2, year 3. I'll send a follow-up email. I'm happy to have a call with anybody to kind of help or talk through any of that. If you have any questions on tools or support or needs for any other kind of information, we're here to provide and support you guys through this process as you move forward with this work in the next 3 years. So, Sarah, Jane, Kathy, let me know if there's anything that you guys need, as well as you all individually. Anything you want to take on, Sarah, Kathy, or Jane, before we kind of break for the day and everybody kind of unwinds or catches up on what they need to?
I want to say thank you real quick, and Sarah, at some point, if you could talk to us about the school situation and that thing that you mentioned in our group, that would be great, but not now, obviously. But thank you.
Yeah, so next steps from here, you're going to be getting an email from me within the next couple of days. The fun little, hey, here's the weekly update with things. There's going to be a few different things. Just looking at your spreadsheets and thinking through what those are going to look like in your community. And also starting next week, it's going to be our weekly check-ins. I would like it if you guys could join at least either one, Tuesday or Thursday, doesn't matter which one. Ideally, Northern is Tuesday. Northern Minnesota is Tuesday. Let me just double check before I say that out loud. Open office hours, Northern Minnesota is Tuesday, Southern Minnesota is Thursday, but it doesn't have to be that way. You guys can go either way with that. This is in lieu, so typically in the past, we've done 1 hour of training with every single week with each market. If you guys would like that, I'm here for that. Let me know, and I'm happy to do that. Jane and I are both willing to help. Kathy's willing. We're all here to help. But that 1 hour, I think working in groups is going to be advantageous so that we can get to the bottom of some of these questions. We might make it so that some of those weekly meetings end up being, focused in on market share boxes, or maybe it's focused in on Veggie RX, or maybe it's focused in on sponsorship. And you guys are driving that. And so if you feel the need to put a focus on who should we reach out to when it comes to sponsorships? Who should we reach out to when we're looking for donations? How should we write up those donations? When we're trying to navigate the reports in Open Food Network, we made sales and now we need to figure out the reports. Like, we can make those weekly meetings geared towards that. And that's our goal, is to be here to help you. and support you through that. So if you plant the seed, no pun intended, you guys, we really do want to plant some seeds in every community. Plant the seed and say, Sarah, I'd like to know more about how to come up with sponsorships, or I'd like to know more about market share boxes. We have the information. We're trying not to overwhelm you. And it's really hard because it's like, we already know that answer. Wait, don't do that yet. We have help. So asking us when you're there, I think that's one of the reasons, and I said this to Christine when we were in the separate room, that's one of the reasons I'm still the manager in Red Wing. So I have stuff all set up in Wabasha, and using Wabasha as the example is kind of an unfair advantage because number one, we have a lot of connections in the community. Laura's lucky because there's connections already there and existing financing resources. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm staying in Red Wing is we don't have any of those wholesale connections. We don't have any of those Veggie RX connections, and I'm starting from scratch like the rest of you. Yes, some of my farmers are online, but they're transitioning to a new platform, so they hate me. Every one of them, they're all yelling at me. So like, I'm there, I'm in your shoes, I get it. And that helps. And so you're not alone. And don't let this today, the last couple days, Sarah said it when she said it's the financial root canal. But that wasn't as bad when you actually take the time to look at the spreadsheet. That was a really cool spreadsheet you created, Sarah, and I appreciate that. Long story short, we're here for you. Appreciate all of the time you've put into this. I did send you an email today saying, get your harvest hours in because I want to get everybody paid for the first couple months. And I need, in order to do that, I need to get Jody the hours. So if you guys can take a few minutes and put your harvest hours in for January through February, the end of February, and get that in.
And then when they do that, they'll have real numbers to put in that spreadsheet. Yay!
It all connects. It all connects. We're trying to make life easier. One quick thing, you'll probably see a post survey link come from Sarah as well. So just watch for that too. Thank you for completing the pre-surveys. You'll see a post survey link come through just because we like to know how we're doing. And if you have any remaining questions, provide additional info. So
do you want me to drop that in the chat?
Oh, sure. If you've got it, I can also too, but you can go back to harvest. I just wanted to share that quick as well.
I just want to quick show off what Willowlyn just posted on the Grand Rapids Farmers Market Facebook page a short time ago, and it's already got 272 people reached, but this is our farmer buyer meeting in Grand Rapids, March 14th, and there's also one happening in Aiken that afternoon into the evening. So we doubled up Aiken and Grand Rapids, and that is intended to kick off the farmer buyer connections and hopefully help both of those hubs start making some wholesale buyer connections. So way to go, Willowlyn.
Jane, do you want to share that on the Farmers Market Food Hub aggregation site, just so that we have it as a reference?
You mean the page?
I do, Sarah, but I'm a Facebook dummy, so you'll have to tell me how to do it. Like I hit share and it only gave me the option to share it to one of the pages I already administer.
Yeah,
So
just click on share to. Oh, she must not be an admin on the hub one.
But on where it says Grand Rapids on the very top, go up, don't go down there. Yep, you see, now go farther to the right. You see that little circle? Stay up there. Nope, shoot, don't click on that one. Okay, go back to that site.
yeah, Sarah, we can do this. We can do
It's
this. We don't have
303. We should
to
probably pop off.
make everybody suffer through trying to figure this out.
But they all might be having the same issue, so I was wondering. But anyway,
have a good one.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day, all. Thank you.
Thank you.